across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey, good morning to you. Well, I say good morning. I mean morning. Let's go with a more accurate description. Morning. The morning after the day before. 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's absolutely fantastic to have your company. If you think that my gravelly voice today is a result of all the cheering on of Rachel Reeves for, you know, axing the two-child benefit cap and putting taxes up on workers and you know, the strivers, you are sorely wrong. It's just the latest lurgy doing the rounds in the office. But for apologies for any sniffling and snuffling that comes through the show. But I think we're all feeling a little bit downhearted today, if not just frankly downright feeling furious about what we heard from the Chancellor yesterday. Sorry, from the Office of Budget Responsibility, who delivered the budget about an hour before she was supposed to. But we have an awful lot to talk about. So whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, as I say, great to have you join us and great to hear from you as well on your thoughts on the budget, because let's face it, Rachel Reeves dropped a £30 billion tax bomb on Britain in the budget. She caved into left-wing demands in her party to boost welfare payments. The Chancellor betrayed Labour's manifesto explicit pledge on taxes that she wouldn't raise taxes on working people, with a £13 billion freeze on income tax and national insurance thresholds lasting 3 years, not the 2 years we'd expected. She also, as we know, axed the two-child benefit cap as part of a spending spree that saw projected welfare spending rise by £16 billion a year. So if you're wondering why you got up this morning to go to work on a cold, miserable day, yeah, you're paying for them. They're still in bed, by the way. Just pondering maybe one of them might go and get a cup of tea before they go back to bed, but they are not at work. And now, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, had an absolute blinder yesterday. She dismissed the Chancellor's welfare giveaway as a budget for Benefit Street. She hit out Rachel Reeves' decision to abolish that benefit cap and warned that working people would end up paying the price. She also quite rightly had a right old go at her for, you know, once again whining that it was all sexism. Also, in extra fun news today, more than 53,000 illegal migrants are missing, according to internal Home Office figures that have emerged. A leaked document suggests that as of October, 53,298 migrants who have breached their immigration bail or escaped from detention are not known to be anywhere in particular. A further 736 foreign offenders have also absconded and gone missing after being released from prison or from detention. The good news just keeps on coming, doesn't it? Also, in the last half hour, we've had new official figures from the Office for National Statistics, and net migration is going to rise again in the final years of the Labour government to almost £350,000 a year, according to those figures. But also, crucially, Home Office, as we just heard from Mark, say that we have now got more people living in hotels who are asylum seekers, and we've got a total of 111,000 people claiming asylum in the year ending September this year. I mean, that is down, though. It's down 84 people. So that smash of the gangs has gone really well, hasn't it? I think that's about the number of people we probably sent to Paris on those BA flights as part of that little swapsy scheme with Macron. But either way, we are in insane territory. It is as simple as that. Well, joining me to discuss the insanity on every single front today, I'm delighted to say once again is Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Reeling, no doubt, still from the budget. I mean, the debacle yesterday of, we basically had most of the budget briefed out in advance anyway, and then, of course, we got the Office of Budget Responsibility leaking it beforehand, and we were all sitting there just before PMQs going, hold on a minute, along with every other broadcast. I think they've just leaked the entire budget. We all got to see Rachel Reeves looking, handed her sort of deputy Torsten Bell's phone, like, you've just had the budget leaked. There's an investigation, all of that. But the real travesty was, of course, the fact that we have basically got money being taken from workers to give to shirkers yesterday. My question I'm going to put to the audience, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, is very simple. What is your reaction to that budget? Your taxes have probably gone up, and they're going to people who are not in work, whether they've got disability, whether they've just got a load of kids that you probably can't afford to have on your wages. But money is going from workers to shirkers. It's really that simple. So what's your reaction? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. There is a number to call. You can text 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Henry, what's your response to that?
I mean, the funny thing about the OBR leak, apart from the fact that they finally discovered a way to make people read the EFO, the Economic and Fiscal Outlook, which they publish twice a year, and a lot of people, understandably, don't really wade through. But if you leak the budget, people absolutely will read it. Is the reveal? Because for weeks we had Rachel Reeves being like, oh, you know, there's a black hole. That it's Brexit actually, and you're like, well, we left Brexit. We left the European Union several years ago, Rachel. I don't know if it's why it would be a surprise. And then the OBR is just like, actually, that black hole didn't exist, and she knew it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so actually she could have avoided quite a lot of these tax-raising measures.
But she did keep on saying repeatedly, these are my choices, this is my budget.
Absolutely.
She was very big on, I wonder whether Keir Starmer said, can you make sure it's about you and not about me? I don't want anything to do with this, Gov. But it was all about her. And she's massively now into, you know, giving more benefits. But about 6 months ago, she was trying to cut the benefits bill.
Well, exactly. And then basically what happened is the government learned that it can't do this because Labour backbenchers won't let it. And therefore it has folded completely on this, because actually when the messaging for all this was coming in, Rachel Reeves was saying actually the economy is worse than we thought. It turns out we left the European Union. It turns out somebody did austerity 14 years ago. You know, all of these deeply plausible reasons why she would have to go back on a promise that she made last year. And then all of a sudden it turns out no, actually the OBR forecast was better than expected. Did she use that in order to forego some of these taxes on working people? Absolutely not. She's used it to drive up the benefits bill again. It's just absolutely extraordinary. But she's right. It is a choice. It is absolutely a choice.
And it is a political choice, isn't it? Because, again, I mean, particularly on the two-child benefit cap, which I have, let's face it, banged on about for quite some weeks, I genuinely think it's quite bizarre when you've got people who are in work, who are doing everything they can to look after their own kids, who are basically making choices and say, look, we can only afford 1 or 2 kids, to basically force them to a position to pay more tax, even low earners and average earners to pay. This isn't a tax, you know, changing tax thresholds isn't a tax on the rich, it's a tax on people. Apparently, under 30 people earning under 35 grand are going to be the worst hit in terms of, you know, how hard it's going to hit them, in terms of their, you know, what's in their pockets. But is more of their income gets taxed at the basic rate. But it's you know, they are making choices about not being able to have more kids because of this, and having to work and everything, you know, and to pay all these bills. And then people who are not working, and again, this nonsense two-child benefit cap. You know, people confuse it. They think it's the 20-odd quid you get for child benefit. It's not child benefit. It's not what everyone gets unless you're a very high earner. It is it is £3.5 grand a year extra for each extra child over your first 2 kids, which you get if you're also on universal credit. And people, but these are working people. Well, yes, I mean, they say, you know, over half are working. They're not. Over half aren't working, and if they are working, they're working part-time. And in fact, in most of the households where there are two parents, which is usually the case, they're actually almost, well, half as single parents, half 2 parents. But the single parent families, you know, there's often a dad who is paying for stuff, but it's not taken into account, and they no longer take into account any money that dad gives mum anymore as part of their benefit claimant. So that's just not even, they could get £1,000, £2,000 a month from dad, doesn't count. But in other families where they have 2 parents, only one of them is working. And they're probably working part-time. Well, if you want to have 6 kids, that's entirely up to you. But you're going to have to get a really good starting job, and you're going to work some really long hours, mate. Simple as that.
I think this is the absolutely baffling, because I'm very pro people, you know, having more kids. Frankly, you know, we desperately need a future generation of taxpayers.
Which kids do we need? Yeah, but
sorry, this was going to be my point,
Apologies.
Which is that you know, what you could spend far less money to iron out the absurd cliff edges for child benefit for productive working people, right? You know, currently you're in this absurd situation where all of your allowance goes if one member of your household earns more than, you know, I think it's 100k, whereas you could have 2 on 80 who still get the child benefit. That creates all kinds of perverse incentives. There are lots of people, as you rightly say, all the way up the income scale, who, because of the absurd way that we do things in this country, struggle to afford children because housing is so cripplingly expensive. You could do an awful lot of deregulation to make childcare cheaper and more affordable. That wouldn't actually
childcare doesn't have to cost as much as it does.
You could do what Miriam Cates was proposing to do under the Conservatives, which is make child credit, or whatever it's called, fungible, so that people can use it as cash to subsidise working less or paying relatives. You could make it legal. Do you know it's currently illegal to employ a babysitter for more than 2 hours during working hours?
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oops.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Because they want to get rid of informal care arrangements, right? So they want to only allow you to send your kids to a registered
So
nursery.
it's not cash in hand.
Exactly. And so you could do all of those things to make having families cheaper for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And
but
that
they don't
formal
do
care.
that.
I mean, certainly I remember when I was little in the 70s, I mean, it was Auntie Jean next. She wasn't an auntie. She'd look after us for a few hours after school, so, my mum could finish work. I mean, but this is the thing. There are so many decisions. Also, student loans. Student loans. I mean, that's people are sitting there with 50, 60 grand's worth of debt and they're paying off that massive high interest rate. They're trying to get on the housing ladder because the house prices keep going up year and year and year. Why? Oh, because we have millions more people and no new homes.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out from yesterday, what a surprise. Labour are already behind on target for building their 1.5 million new homes. I said they wouldn't build 1.5 million new homes. They're not going to build 1.5 million new homes. We actually need about 3 or 4 million new homes. But they're not going to. The only way of getting house prices down is going to be to literally build loads more houses. Simple as that. So there is actually a supply that meets demand. If you did that and people could go, yeah, I can afford to settle down at 30, so I can afford to have 2 or 3 kids, that would be a good thing. I'm controversial view. I'm not entirely sure we want a load of people who are currently not able to support their own families, most of whom are not in work, so not full-time work as two mum and dad, which is what the case is for most families, to be having more kids. Because statistically, children of non-working families are not likely to be productive themselves. I'm sorry, those are the stats. So I'm not entirely sure that having a whole new generation of people who are going to be living off the state is going to help our demographics in our country. There's no doubt at all, a lot of this actually, and let's be honest, big elephant in the room, is that a lot of this is about pleasing Labour backbenchers. Labour backbenchers who are in seats where they worry they're going to lose them on current polling, where they have a large Muslim population, that is, or ethnic minority population, the largest families in this country, or the groups, the communities who are most likely to have very large families, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, are Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Black African, and then Afro-Caribbean. That in that order. Well, and we're largely in Labour constituencies. This will be pleasing their voters. It is that simple. This is a vote raising, not a child raising target. And it makes people uncomfortable, but them's the facts.
And the irony, of course, is the fact that it's going to absolutely come back to bite them, because you see the IFS, you see the OBR, they're all saying, it is curious that Rachel Reeves is promising all of these new tax rises and everything else just before the next general election, right? Because as a result, Labour has this huge majority which is causing it all kinds of problems. But that means that there's an awful lot of Labour MPs sitting on very narrow majorities in bits of the country that don't normally vote Labour. Yeah. Right? And actually, as much as some of them might be soft left and quite like all the spending increases, at some point we're going to get close enough to the next election that they're really going to start realising how angry all their voters are at all the taxes that they're paying.
Oops.
And Rachel Reeves is going to have to come back again, right? This is, and it's actually impossible to work out what she's going to do. I genuinely don't know, because currently her plan is that she's going to bring in a whole load of really unpopular tax increases just before the next election.
Which is not very good politics, but we know they're rubbish at politics.
But the odds of her actually doing that are quite low. Yeah. Right. But what else does she do? Because they won't let her cut spending either.
Yeah. So you can't cut money, and you can't borrow anymore because the markets won't let you.
So it's going to be an absolute nightmare.
I mean, you thought it was bad now. It's going to be this stat completely threw me. I mean, it's genuinely really, really terrifying. The average weekly earnings after inflation will still be lower by 2030 than back in 2008 before the crash. Average weekly earnings are going to be... If you're wondering why you don't feel like you're getting any better off, no matter how hard you work or if you get a pay rise, because after inflation, after all that's happened, lots of freezing of pay in the private as well as public sector, and a lot of people actually losing in real terms for quite a few years in those austerity years, that's because you are, in real terms, earning less. That is the reality. That's why you don't just feel poorer, you are poorer. And the answer to that from the Chancellor yesterday was... We're going to take a bit more. We're going to take a bit more. We're going to give it to the people who are poorer than you. But why are they poorer than you? They're poorer than you because they don't go out to work. They're poorer than you because they chose to have a load more kids that they couldn't afford and you couldn't afford, so you chose not to have them. They're poorer than you because they are claiming to have a disability, a mental health issue, which... OK, there are people who do have disabilities and mental health issues who we should absolutely help. I would say we should give them more help than we currently give them. However, it is statistically... unlikely at best that we alone in the Western world have this incredibly high proportion of people who apparently are just unable to work through disability or mental health problems. Our mental health problems are off the scale. People say it's lockdown. Well, every other country in Europe pretty much, other than Sweden, had lockdowns, and they haven't got the same issue. So there's something else going on. And there's some other stats. I mean, Fraser Nelson from the Times, a quarter of working age people in Birmingham, Liverpool and Blackpool are out of work on benefits. A quarter, 1 in 4 people of working age are not in work. In Glasgow and Manchester, 1 in 5 are on out-of-work benefits. This is unsustainable. And then we're told we need to bring in all these people from abroad because we've got no one to do the jobs. Well, when you're not eligible for the benefits, when you're hungry enough, you'll take the jobs. It's as simple as that.
I mean, there's that famous line from Westminster where Sir Humphrey thinks he's not being recorded, and he says this country can have as much unemployment as it's prepared to pay for in social security. And there is an element of truth to that, right? Because yes, there are always people who genuinely need help. There are, as you say, people with serious mental health conditions and disabilities, which mean that they can't work, and those people deserve care.
And they deserve more than they're getting right now.
Well, I think you're right, exactly. But why don't they get as much care as they need? Because we distribute the money so incredibly widely, and the Conservatives have to take their share of the blame for this, because it was them, I think, that passed the change in the treatment of mental health conditions so that it's treated as equivalent to physical disability. Now, with the best will in the world, the problem with that is that mental health conditions are so broadly defined. I have several sort of sources who work in mental health because they write for us sometimes anonymously. And apparently there's now this sort of euphemistic phrase that they use called serious mental health conditions.
As opposed to
this is
bit anxious on a Monday morning.
Now this might effectively translate to actual mental health conditions, right? It means, you know, your schizophrenics, your people, your psychopaths, your people with genuine...
actually need day-to-day help.
As opposed to people who are depressed or anxious or sad or whatever it is. And that's not a great thing to be in many cases.
Or have perfectly normal human emotions, which we've now medicalised.
We pathologise a lot. Yeah, exactly. We medicalise and pathologise a lot of it. And it's also, it makes people treat it as an excuse, because I'm anxious. That's something you can work on. I have anxiety is something the universe has done to you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it gets the same people saying you're treating alcoholism or drug addiction as a disease, as opposed to the result of, frankly, often the time, bad choices. Now, it's easy to make good choices in certain lives, but you still made a choice that first time. You weren't addicted the first time. I mean, some of these stats, they're just extraordinary. They really are. What do you make of the concern? I mean, it's quite rightly, and all the interviews that Rachel Reeves has done this morning, this has come up with all of the interviews. She didn't appear on Talk. Don't know why. Rachel, if you happen to be Ray, if you have to be free, do give us a call. That she's broken not only the manifesto pledge not to raise taxes on working people. Now, it did go on to say, which is why we won't raise the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. But of course, they did raise the rate of national insurance for employers. But then she's also broken the promise from last budget when she said she wouldn't come back for more. And she did come back for more. She come back for a heck of a lot more. That's going to be a real issue in terms of trust, other than the fact that, of course, no one actually thought they'd keep the manifesto pledge, did they?
Well, I think a lot of voters probably did. You know, you and I, it's our curse, I suppose, that we have to follow politics 24/7 every day of the year.
It is an affliction. Right? But it's probably a mental health problem. We could probably claim for it.
I mean, maybe they need to create something just for us. Maybe we'd be nicer to them. But I think a lot of people understandably tune out, right? And they live their day-to-day lives, and then they tune in for an election, and the government is making them promises, and they probably believe a lot of those promises. And it was never credible, because even right at the beginning, right, when Rachel Reeves first came in and spent all that money, and she was like, well, you know, I'm going to start my fiscal diet in the latter half of this parliament. You're like, are you? That's a very strange, no, take it from a Conservative who, you know, our party does austerity, right? The way that you do austerity is you do it at the beginning of a parliament so that hopefully it's paid off by the end and you can do some goodies for the election. You don't do it the other way round. You don't do the goodies the first budget after you get in and then starve the public ahead of a general election. So it was always wildly implausible. But the other problem is that the government keeps saying they want growth, right? Because growth brings back the easy politics of having more money to spend. Yeah. But absolutely, the OBR said this, absolutely nothing they're doing
nothing in there
is delivering any growth. Yeah, and there's no reason to expect it to.
We do though have growth, as always, in illegal migration, and we've got a load of figures that have come out. The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has reacted to those figures. They're quite a complicated business, because we've also got the news that more than 53,000 illegal migrants are missing. Just don't know where they are. I mean, just working do you wonder why wages aren't going up? It's because there's a load of illegal migrants working basically for half the wages. But these are the new immigration figures that were out, and they show that Home Office latest figures show that 36,273 asylum seekers were housed in hotels in the year ending September this year. It's an increase in the latest figures, up by about 4,000 in the year to March. The top nationalities arriving by small boat are Come on, pot pickers, can you guess? It's Eritreans, Afghans, Iranians, Sudanese and Somalians. So hello to all of you watching and listening at home in your asylum hotel. But over 50,000 people arrived to the UK via illegal routes, 51,000 arrivals in total. Of those small boat arrivals accounted for almost 90% of those. But we've also got a whole load of people who turn up, of course, and then just claim asylum after arriving on a visa and the like. But long-term net migration, according to these figures, for the year ending in June 2025, so basically we're looking at a whole year of the first year of the Labour government, it was around 2/3 lower than a year earlier, but we at 204,000, which sounds good. The key thing here is, though, this is as a result of Rishi Sunak's measures in his final year as Prime Minister, basically cutting down on that Boris wave of insanity of bringing in millions of people. But it's interesting, the Office of Budget Responsibility, I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you here, they have actually predicted that net migration will actually go up under this government. They're actually saying it is going to actually carry on going up. So what is going on there? I mean,
essentially, it's really important not to allow the Boris wave to set expectations for what an acceptable level of net immigration is, because previously, we were rightly exercised about the fact that we had 350, 400,000 people coming in, and then all of a sudden we had a couple of years where it was over 1 million. I think in 2023 it was over 1 million people. 98% of Britain's population growth that year was people who weren't born here, and so suddenly it's falling from that kind of peak. And you're like, oh, well, it's falling now. And it's like, OK, but Boris Johnson doubled it. Yeah. So it's still far too high. I mean, the essential problem...
In the tens of thousands. I remember the days, tens of thousands. Do you remember?
Yeah, well, exactly. And a promise that David Cameron made twice and yet never actually attempted to implement. There were no restriction measures. I mean, the problem here, they outlined some of the problems, which is essentially that in Britain you can come here on one type of visa and you can then switch to another kind of visa. Yeah. And so it's mostly study visas, right? People come here on a student visa and then, that looks like it's going to be temporary because a lot of students do leave, but then all of a sudden you switch to a work visa and that puts you on a pathway to...
And you still need somewhere to live when you are here anyway. Well, I mean, Sharana Mahmood basically said, we said we deliver this. Well, yeah, all very well, but actually, again, this isn't actually something they delivered. This is something that's happened as a result of changes under the Tories ahead of the last election. Look, there's so much more I want to talk about, and I know you want to talk about it as well. Rachel Reeves delivered a budget for Benefit Street yesterday, taking money from workers to give to shirkers. Your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. Also, the next half hour, I'm going to play you a fantastic video of someone setting Kemi Badenoch's response to the budget yesterday to rap. You don't want to miss that. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is indeed Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Henry Hill here as well. Let's have a little listen to what you've got to say about this just astonishing budget taking from the workers to give to the shirkers. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Tarquin is in London. Hello, Tarquin, what do you want to say?
Julia, I just wish I was Mr. HB to wake up with you with a voice like that in the morning, and we would last a bit longer.
He's not. I've got to tell you, he's not coming near me at the moment. I'm just sitting there on the sofa, and he comes home with a pile of sort of soggy, sort of snot-laden tissues. I can assure he's coming nowhere near.
If you ask him to do a voice recording, if you sound like that, you can do with the dishwasher, darling. He'll do it for weeks.
You're very sweet. What do you want to say about Rachel Reeves? I imagine it's not going to be as kind.
God, it's me trying to be serious. Geez, that's not going to happen. Basically, no. I think something you mentioned earlier, Julia, I wanted to get your take and your guest's take on this, is that with this move, and it definitely is from workers to shirkers, but is this, guys, is this another step on the ladder of that shift to what they call UBI, Universal Basic Income?
Oh, do you know what? Yes, basically, there's this whole lefty idea, and they've done loads of trials in places like Sweden and everywhere, haven't they? Where basically you pay everybody. It's like sort of 15 grand, 12 to 15 grand, and everyone just gets that, whether you work or not. And the idiots behind these things are of the view that people will work because they found work so rewarding. And of course, they're completely wrong. People go, sod this, I'm going to go and watch daytime telly.
Yeah.
So do you reckon that there is a long-term plan? They're just going to put everyone on the payroll?
I think it could be, Julia. That's the sad part, is I think it could be part of an ideological zealotry march. It's a long march to this sort of socialist Fabian utopia where literally we're all just proles. And, of course, what that makes it very easy for them to do is to, once they've introduced the digital ID, then they move us on to CBDC, central bank digital currencies.
Oh, he's got more. And the digital ID card, got to have the digital ID card as well. And Tony Blair loves so much. Helquin, I love that. I'm going to put that to Henry. Thank you very much. Henry, look, I mean, there are an awful lot of people on the left who do think universal basic income is a good thing. They are stark staring bonkers for thinking this. No understanding at all of what motivates people. Communism, socialism, it doesn't work anywhere in the world. It has been tried. It doesn't work because it's fundamentally flawed. But does that tally at all, that idea, with the fact that, let's face it, Rachel Reeves did actually, she and the Prime Minister, actually, they wanted backbenchers punished earlier this year. They had the whip taken away from them for voting for the two-child benefit cap to be brought in.
So the one reason I think that they will never do universal basic income, if nothing else, is that you actually, in theory, pay it to absolutely everyone. And that would mean paying it to rich people and high earners and hard workers, right? Because actually, in this country, things like the personal allowance, right? The easiest way to have a universal basic income would be to simply give everyone the personal allowance. But as you know, once you hit a certain point in the income tax threshold,
I do know this.
you start losing losing the personal allowance, right? And so the Resolution Foundation is the think tank that always produces the distributional impact, which is, and can you imagine if a Labour Chancellor stood up and said, we're going to let people earning 150 grand a year keep the 12,500 personal allowance.
They'd go ballistic.
Right, they could absolutely, so that's the reason.
That's the only reason. Otherwise, they'd happily do it. They think everyone should be on the payroll, but there we are. Let's go to Tracy, who's in Staffordshire. Tracy, what do you want to say?
I just want to say to you, the thing that worries me more about the budget is not actually how appallingly bad the budget is, but the amount of money that she's borrowing, adding to our debt. I mean, 100 billion so far this year. And, the taxpayer is being hammered, okay? if you can just imagine how much more our taxes would have to go up so we weren't borrowing anything.
Yeah. Well, bearing in mind, of course, that borrowing, I mean, taxes are going up for people now, but borrowing's going up, and that's being paid by taxes in the future. So it's all going to be paid for by us. It's not coming out of the, you know, it's not just coming out of the magic money tree.
No, and this is what I think to be honest, what probably the socialists don't get is, unlike yourself, who obviously enjoys the job and drags herself in even if she's poorly, bless you, most people don't love the job.
I've done some rotten jobs.
It's rotten, and you go, and I think and why wouldn't somebody, if you're going to end up in a dead end job, why wouldn't you stay at home? I mean, I just think the amount of lack of potential that you could have had somebody who's a third generation benefits, whatever. That person, under the right circumstances, could have given us a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just a waste of human potential.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. Honestly, 100% on that, Tracy. Thank you so much. Really, really good call. A couple of text messages before we go on. Mark says, I didn't expect anything else from this lot. Joe says, I've worked day and night to provide for my family and make a life for myself, and this is what I get in return. Ben, not surprised one bit. Is anyone actually shocked? And Matt says the Labour Party will be buried at the next election. And Sam says, under Labour, it's OK to have as many kids as possible while sitting at home not working. Make it make sense. And that's why I'll never vote for Labour or the Lib Dems. They never help the working class, says Tal. And Scott says, we need to end this government or it will end us. Now, you may have seen... on the show yesterday, I think Ian Collins was taking some of this live as well. Kemi Badenoch gave an absolutely barnstorming response to Rachel Reeves' budget. It was, I mean, brutal. Doesn't do justice to what she had to say. But someone clever on Tinternet has managed to come up with the most brilliant, I'm assuming, I can only assume AI rap version of Kemi Badenoch delivering her budget response. Have a watch and listen to this.
All we've had from her is wallowing, wailing, self-pity speeches, victimhood, flailing, crying about misogyny, whining about mansplaining. But listen up, Kemi's here, and the roof's about to cave in.
So, man and deputy speaker.
Let me break it down clean. Woman to woman rate, I'll tell you what I mean. People ain't complaining because you female on the scene. They complaining because you run the country like a broken machine.
Yeah?
How good is that? I mean, it goes on much longer than that. How good is that? Absolutely nailed it. It really did. Hey, that's quite clever, isn't it? Anyway, coming up next, going to talk to someone rather more sensible about the budget. Carl Emerson, who's the former Deputy Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. What does he make about this budget? And why is there no growth, given that's supposed to be the #1 priority for this government? How do we know that? Well, because they told us so. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to my next guest, economist and former Deputy Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the think tank. Carl Emerson joins us to talk about the budget. Good morning to you, Carl.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, I suppose I was going to ask your basic reaction to the budget and what we heard. Good for Britain, good for growth, good for workers, good for who?
Well, the outlook is really quite poor. It is particularly, I think, striking how poor it is for households. So if you think during the 2010s, we had per person income growth after inflation averaging about 1% a year. That's really bad by historical standards, really not a good decade. The latest forecast suggests that a combination of the economy not growing very quickly over the next few years, plus the Chancellor's choice to put taxes up by 26 billion a year, means that we're looking at average income growth of about 0.3% a year per person. So some growth for household incomes, but even weaker than what we had to put up with over the 2010s. And as I say, that's a combination of weak growth in the economy, plus the fact the Chancellor's putting up taxes, which clearly squeezes household incomes. It does have some benefits. It will reduce the deficit. The government's borrowing, but it puts extra strain on households.
Well, you say it reduces the deficit, but not by as much as the taxes have gone up, because a whole whack of it is going to go on benefits for people, and that has been the big concern for an awful lot of people. You know, workers are facing more tax, including people at the very bottom end of the working income scale, and benefits are going up by inflation, and more people are going to be able to getting benefits, particularly those with larger families under the axe of the two-child benefit cap. It's very interesting, the Office for Budget Responsibility, as we saw before the budget with that leak, that they made it very clear that there was no measure, not one measure in this budget that would actually deliver growth, which is a bit bizarre given that we've been told for the last year and a half that this was the number one priority for Rachel Reeves, and of course is the only way really of delivering rising living standards for people.
That's certainly true. Over the longer term, growth really, really matters. If you get more economic growth, it sounds a little bit abstract, more productivity growth, but what that translates into is stronger growth in wages, better jobs, and therefore households able to enjoy both better public services, because if they're earning more, they'll naturally pay more tax, but they'll also have more left in their pockets to spend on the things they want to be buying as well. So more growth, I think the government's right to say that more growth should be the number one priority. What we clearly need is a relentless focus on the kinds of policies that will get you that growth across the board. Now, there aren't easy fixes here, there aren't quick wins, but there are lots of things you can do which would bring about growth over the longer term.
Such as?
Well, some of them the government are doing, for example, looking at planning restrictions, looking at house building. They're right to focus on that.
But they're already behind schedule on their house building plans, 1.5 million more homes, and they're not going to build one. You know, and everyone knows they're not going to build.
The target there is incredibly ambitious, and it wouldn't be surprising if they fall short. But
well, it's ambitious, but still not enough.
They're right to think that's one thing to focus on. Getting your education system working, fixing competition policy, getting your trade policies right. There's a whole slew of measures you need to focus on. It does take time. You do need to be patient. It's not going to get you more sustainable growth in the next year, for example, if you fix your education system. But over the longer run, you're right, it can really pay off.
Yeah, it's interesting how none of those measures seem to include putting taxes up on people. Now, look, lots of Labour backbenchers have been very happy yesterday to see Mansion tactic. Tax the rich, that's a good thing, but also give more money to some of the poorer families, those with 3 or more children not eligible for that extra money after the two-child benefit cap was brought in 2017 by the Tories. But the reality is the average worker is going to be worse off, and particularly those who try and get ahead, maybe get a pay rise, they move into the next income bracket and therefore they move into a higher tax bracket. Talk us through some of those tax brackets, because there's, again, an amazing information this morning that workers who are earning £35,000 a year or less would have been better off, not with the freezing of tax thresholds for 20% rate, 40% and 45% rate, but would have been better off with a really straightforward, blatantly manifesto promise busting tax rise, as in we are going to put up the basic rate of income tax by 1 or 2 pence, which is what we thought the Chancellor was going to do, and she hinted strongly that she was, and then you turned on that. But what do you make of her decision not to just go for a cross-the-board, blatant, open, honest tax rise rather than what she actually decided to do?
I suspect it is largely about partly it'll be about the transparency of the issue. If you put up the basic rate of income tax, that's something the UK hasn't done since about the mid-1970s. It would be a very, as you say, overt break of both the spirit and the letter of the manifesto. But it would mean that if you're at the top of the basic rate band, if your income's about 50,000, you will pay more in tax than if your income is, say, £15,000 a year. What she's done instead is freeze the points at which you start to pay national insurance and income tax. That means for people who are already basic rate taxpayers, they'll all pay the same additional in terms of income tax, so in cash terms. So it's a bit of a bigger hit for sort of lower income basic rate taxpayers than higher income taxpayers. And it means a lot more people will be dragged into tax. There's about 800,000 more people will be paying income tax as a result of yesterday's budget. About 900,000 will be dragged into higher rate tax. And if you go back to the early 90s, we were in a world where only about 7% of income taxpayers were paying the higher rate. It's now going to be getting on for a quarter. That's a really big change in the structure of our income tax system. And I think it's also worth pointing out that more people will be dragged into national insurance, which in my view is also a pretty clear manifesto breach. Yeah. No rise in national insurance. Well, some people will find themselves paying national insurance as a direct result of yesterday's budget.
And it doesn't really matter on the rinky-dink and the small print and the asterisks and and all that. People know whether they're paying more tax or not. They know when they get their pay packet that they haven't got any more in their pay packet, and often they're going to have less. Is this money going to go towards anything worthwhile though? I mean, paying down the debt, that's a good thing because that's just future taxes, and with the interest rates as they are, we're going to need to have that debt's got to come down at some point, and pretty much everyone seems to agree with that who's vaguely sane. But in terms of putting that money on paying for more benefits with our ballooning welfare bill, a lot of that is pensions, to be fair. We've got an ageing population and people are living longer. That should be something that, people living longer should be considered a good thing. But we have got the triple lock, complete and above inflation increase for pensioners. But an awful lot of that money is also going on working age benefits for people. Is that sustainable in the long run?
Well, I think there's two things which she's doing with the money. As you say, she's chosen to go into future with more headroom against her fiscal targets. So instead of a £10 billion buffer, which sounds a lot, but it's really not that big, she's now got a £22 billion buffer. I think that's
sort of rainy day money if it all goes wrong. Something happens with Russia.
I think that's got much to commend it. I think she was wrong to have such a small buffer in the first place. So the extent to which she's running slightly tighter fiscal policy over the next few years, I think that's very justifiable. The big new policy announcement yesterday that was a giveaway was the abolition of the two-child limit. Some will be in favour of that, some will be against. I think it's pretty clear that those that benefit, on average, will gain a lot. So if you gain from getting rid of the two-child limit, your gain will be, on average, about £100 a week. So that's a very big win for those households that benefit. Some will be in work, some will not be in work. They will all have more than two children. It will lift many children and their parents out of poverty. But it's not the kind of measure that, for example, you do if you were focused on let's try and improve work incentives, for example.
Yeah, that's a small problem there. In terms of any good news in the budget, was there anything good?
Well, the downgrade in the forecast that the Chancellor was presented with was actually smaller than I think we feared through the summer with all the debate about what the Chancellor might be doing. So there was a big downgrade in the UK's growth prospects. But actually, given that, you would have expected government finances to look even worse. So actually, while the OBR was kind of giving her unpleasant news on the outlook for growth, what they were saying is the mix of that growth was actually relatively tax rich. So it wasn't hurting her finances anywhere near as much, which is why, in fact, actually, a lot of the tax rises yesterday were about building up more headroom and paying for the two-child limit, rather than being strictly necessary to meet the letter of her fiscal targets.
And that's where the pain is being felt. People feel, well, hold on a minute, did you have to do that? And she did keep talking, didn't she, about how this was her choice, very much stressing her choice.
I think she's right. It was a choice. It wasn't the case the OBR dealt her a really bad hand. As I say, there was some good news in those fiscal numbers as well as some bad news. So she made some choices. I think the choice to run more headroom, to be a bit more cautious on the public finances, is something I at least think is a very good thing. Yep. I think the choice on the two-child limit, people will take different views on depending on their distributional preferences, essentially.
Yeah, indeed. Really interesting to talk to you. Thank you for that analysis. Carl Emerson there, former Deputy Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Henry Hill. It is interesting, Rachel Reeves, how much this was, as you say, her choice. And people, I think people would feel very different if it was sort of, look, you know, we're about to be at war with Russia. We need to spend an extra, 30 billion on defence, and we need to spend it now. I'm afraid taxes are going to go up. I think there is a way that you could actually make that case to the British public and go, right, all hands on deck, guys, this is what we're going to have to do. I just don't think it works when we're going to give a bunch of feckless families a load more cash for having more kids they can't afford. I just don't think those are the same arguments.
Well, they're not, because of course the social contract on higher taxes is normally that people get something back for it, right? This is the classic. Everyone loves talking about sort of social democracy in Scandinavia, except any of the other things that they do, like being really tough on immigration or having for-profit state schools and all the rest of it.
They also have, by the way, incredibly high tax.
Well, they have incredibly high tax, but part of the bargain for that is that everything kind of works and everyone gets it.
I wonder what that's like.
Right.
Imagine living in a country where everything works.
But also, crucially, your middle earners and everything, they all get it as well, because it's genuinely universal. Whereas we've got what we've ended up in Britain.
Years paid maternity leave and things like that. And,
whereas what we've got, and you can oppose or support or oppose that. I'm obviously prefer a smaller state and lower taxes, but what we have here is the worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
Because we have very, very high taxes, but then because everything's expensive and rubbish, the people who pay for it don't get anything back.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't qualify for the free stuff.
No, understandably, and again, we know when we pay more for taxes, we know we're just going to get more pride flags. That's the thing. We're just going to get more lanyards at the civil service, as opposed to anything actually to improve our lives. Well, look, we're going to talk to someone who is a former ONS statistician. That's Jamie Jenkins up next, about one of the other big stories this week, and that, of course, is the latest migration figures, including the fact that more than 53,000 illegal migrants are missing. We don't know where they are. Is that an issue for anyone? I think it should be. We'll talk to Jamie about that up next. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:52 is the time. Let's talk about migration. Yeah, we do that quite a lot on the show. But some very interesting new figures today to discuss. Jamie Jenkins joins us. He's a former statistician with the Office for National Statistics. That is very hard to say, by the way. Good morning to you, Jamie.
Morning, Julia. You all good?
Very well indeed. I want to talk to you about the figures which we found out overnight before we get to the figures we got only just at 9:30 this morning. But figures involving illegal migrants, and more than 53,000 of them are missing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised really, Julia. So we've got people who obviously are coming on small boats, getting into the country. We've people coming on visas who then claim asylum when they have to go home, and 53,000 going missing. The reason I'm not surprised is if people are making the journey to come here in the first place, then if there's a potential that they're going to have their asylum claim rejected and they're going to be deported, well, what's the simplest way of solving that? Well, I'm just going to go and vanish. And
ta-da!
And the key thing here is that, you know, we had Rachel Reeves again in the budget talking about digital ID and tackling illegal work and illegal immigration. I've spoken previously of the, you know, we've got digital ID cards in other parts of the world, and that hasn't fixed that. So if we had digital ID, would these 53,000 suddenly just not vanish and reappear? Of course not. Yeah. So I'm not surprised here, Julia.
I mean, it really is an absolute nonsense, and everyone knows it. But it is extraordinary, I mean, because it does include 736,000, on top of that, 736,000 foreign offenders who've also absconded and gone missing after being released from prison or from detention. And we've had a few of those very high-profile cases recently. The Ethiopian who had sexually assaulted a 14-year-old in Epping being among those. These people are literally just disappearing. And no one knows where they are, but we know that they're criminals, and we know they're not supposed to be in the country. I mean, this is an absolute. I mean, it is a joke. I mean, how bad this system is.
It's a joke, but you know, if you look at the Home Office annual report, one of the things they say in there is that the Home Office's main duty is to protect the border and protect the public. So the fact that they're failing on all measures basically means the government, not just this government, the previous governments, are a complete shambles and a complete failure. Until you get a grip on the border, you aren't going to get the safety for the people who live here already.
No, indeed. And again, as you're quite right, you know, that you should actually put this at both, you know, the Tory government's door as well. But also some figures for the Office of Budget Responsibility yesterday as part of their budget report, the one we got leaked ahead of the budget, pointing out that net migration is set to rise by the end of the Parliament, despite these visa crackdowns, not just by Shabana Mahmood, but also, of course, we had them from Rishi Sunak after that absurd Boris wave. But they warned the Home Secretary that net migration will hit 340,000 by 2030 because of those Boris wave migrants remaining in the UK rather than returning to their home countries. And now that's a concern. But interestingly, we've had some figures this morning at 9:30 this morning suggesting actually that we're going to be seeing numbers going down, and net migration to the UK has dropped by 2/3 to the lowest figure in 4 years. So can you explain how it can be dropping but then going up, and why that is all happening?
Yeah, easy explanation on this one. So the OBR wouldn't have had access to the latest ONS figures when they were doing their forecast. And all they've done basically, Julia, is taken kind of the latest policies around immigration. And then when we get a little bit further out, they've taken the ONS population projections that were done a few years ago, which would be based on the kind of previous levels of immigration.
All right, they're just guessing.
Yeah, basically.
They're guessing. They're going, finger, win, yeah, we think it's going to hit this. So we should take this at pinch of salt. To be fair, they've often been wrong even about figures like for the last year. They have to revise them all the time. They, for instance, didn't realise quite how many Brits were leaving the country. They thought it was a few tens of thousands, and it turned out to be 250,000.
Yeah, and when they do modelling, they actually do a number of different scenarios. They'll do a high immigration, a low immigration, and they have to land somewhere in the middle. And that's kind of what the OBR have done, is just gone back towards us. I wouldn't think that that's too much cause for alarm. But the figures that have come out this morning, and Julia, very quickly, what they're showing is, so net immigration's come down. The reason that's come down is mainly because of the crackdowns that were put in force by Rishi Sunak on the visas. So work entrants are down, study visas are down, and dependents coming in are down as well. But what the continuation we do see in the numbers, though, Julia, is the net immigration is caused by non-EU people coming in, India, China and Pakistan, the top three countries. And we are still seeing net emigration. We spoke recently about the revisions that we've seen, but we're still seeing net emigration. So more Brits leaving than coming in. And there's no surprise the way the budget went yesterday if the numbers get even more next year.
Well, and this is the issue, isn't it? So we can go, oh, well, it's not so bad. Well, most of that is because basically the public found out about the Boris wave when those numbers were apparently a complete shock to the Home Office ahead of the last election, and Rishi Sunak went, we're going to put the kibosh on that. So most of this isn't actually the work of the Labour government, certainly not Shabana Mahmood, who's only been in the job as Home Secretary for a couple of months. But the crucial thing is, even as the numbers do come down, the people coming in are not necessarily skilled people from the EU. They're largely unskilled, I mean, particularly from India and Pakistan, particularly from Pakistan. We know the rate of unemployment from people from Pakistan is one of the highest rates in the country. But also, crucially, that the people who are coming in are more likely to be lower skilled and low wage than the Brits who are choosing to leave. And that's a really big issue for our demographics and, frankly, for balancing the books.
Yeah, it has huge implications. And obviously we know that when people come from India and Pakistan, just generally they have larger families. If they're younger people, they're going to cost more with this change in the child benefit policy that come yesterday, because there's just generally people who are born from outside of the EU. When you look at the number of children that they have in their families, the statistics do show that they're higher.
Is that good for our demographics though? We're told we need more kids.
Well, we do need more children, Julia, but ultimately, the government needs to get a grip on. We don't need to bring more people in to create more children. We need to have policies that are more family friendly to encourage people who are already here to have more children. That's the ultimate thing. But successive governments have not built enough houses. You were talking about that just recently. The cost of trying to get on the housing ladder has gone through the roof in relation to wages. So young adults don't tend to live together as early as they did in previous generations.
They ain't making babies. Yeah, it's as simple as that, isn't it? Jamie Jenkins, former statistician at the ONS, thank you so much. I'll get the thoughts of Henry Hill on that. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that as well. But in particular, I want to hear from you about the budget. A budget for, for taking money from workers to give to shirkers. Your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Lots of top guests to come. This is Talk. We are, as you well know, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. We're approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. I'm apologising for the gravelly voice and the occasional snuffle. I got the latest lurgy going around. No doubt you've probably got it as well. I don't know, maybe you didn't put the alarm clock on for work this morning because, hey, a lot of people don't anymore. They're not at work, but don't worry. They've still got an income coming in, thanks to those of you who did get up to your alarm clock this morning, because we got that budget delivered by the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, yesterday. That was no doubt a budget for Benefit Street. It was a budget for workers, for shirkers paid for by the workers, for all the people who, frankly, are doing absolutely nothing whatsoever of any use to be productive for society, being paid for by those who do go out every single day the alarm clock goes off and to do their bit for their own families and indeed to pay for others. So I'd love to hear your reaction to that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. We're going to talk more about that. Going to talk more about the apparently the wave of net migration going down, largely because of what Rishi Sunak had to do to deal with that Boris wave. But over the years, it's going to go up by 2030, according to official statistics. So we're going to have more people in the country. Oh, yeah. And a lot of those are going to be illegal migrants, not least including the 53,000 illegal migrants who just missing. Home Office just don't know where they are, including 736 foreign offenders. Just don't know where they are. They've just gone missing. I mean, and that's absolutely fine. We're totally fine with that, aren't we? Because they absolutely know what they're doing at the Home Office, don't they? So going to be talking about that. Also going to be talking about the latest on Russia and Ukraine as well. Joining me for all the chat, I'm delighted to say all morning, is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Morning once again to you.
Morning.
I mean, the figures on this budget are kind of mind-blowing. The whole thing yesterday was just extraordinary, with a budget that had been almost entirely leaked anyway by the Treasury before she even stood up after PMQs at 12:30 yesterday, but then was leaked in its absolute entirety, all confirmed by the Office for Budget Responsibility, who basically pressed send on a document that basically went out online before Prime Minister's questions at midday, and released the entire budget. I mean, normally that document is sent the moment the Chancellor says, I commend this budget to the House, sits down, and at that point they press send, and then all the stats, all the figures are there, and everyone can go through all the fine detail. But no, they did it. I mean, some people are saying 20 minutes early. No, it was an hour plus early, because she spoke for a best part of an hour. I know, when it felt like longer, it's got to be said. First of all, just what did you make of that complete shambles? And the Office of Budget Responsibility Chair basically saying he's written to apologise to Rachel Reeves, he's apologised publicly. There's a big investigation. Is that seriously significant? Some are saying it could be criminal.
I mean, I don't know about the status of the criminal law. Maybe it is. That's deeply unfortunate for somebody at the OBR if that's the case. But I think the funny thing is, it's just, I can't remember when exactly this happened, but it used to be there was complete purdah on the budget, right? And that was respected by both sides, to the point at which, at one point, an entire budget was left on a bus, and a newspaper got hold of it, and they handed it back to the Treasury.
Yes.
And they didn't print it.
Yes.
Because that was the rules. And the people who've got rid of that are the politicians, because nowadays what happens is the Treasury, as you say, was selectively leaking the budget for weeks. And so, yes, obviously it's not great for the Chancellor that it's been leaked, but frankly, the Treasury was doing the exact same thing. The whole point was supposed to be that the first people who hear about the budget is the House of Commons. That was the.
But also, we all hear it exactly the same time, because it affects markets.
And we hear all of it at once.
Yeah.
Right?
As a package of measures.
Exactly. Whereas now what happens is you get selective leaks about bits of it and all the rest of it. So I've got very little sympathy with the government, because for once, actually, at least the entire thing leaked at the same time, so we could get a sort of holistic view of all of the measures, including, as I mentioned the first time, that wonderful bit from the OBR where they said actually there was no black hole. The reason taxes are going up is to pay for welfare.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that was basically the message. And look, and that is there are two really, really key messages that have come out of that budget. One is that, yeah, your taxes are going up if you're working, and even if you are, oh yeah, taxes on the wealthy, mansion tax. Oh well, most of us don't. We're not one of the 100,000 who've got a £2 million mansion. But I hate to tell you, like the inheritance tax and like the top rate of tax and the higher rate of tax. Those taxes that are for like those people over there. They have a funny habit, don't they, of coming down and down and down. And with inflation, as it's been and could be one day again, you could be a very average earner and have a very average home in some parts of the country, and very soon you could end up paying more of these things. These things don't tend to get scrapped. And even if like the Tories say, oh, this is terrible, yeah, once they've got that money coming in, they tend not to scrap these things, and the thresholds, as we've seen, get frozen. So as our previous guest was pointing out, it used to be 7% of people paid the higher rate, 40% tax rate or above. Now it's 1 in 4. I mean, that's an extraordinary change in just a small time. So there is that aspect, but there's also the aspect of that, that it was a choice for her to basically, put taxes up, and it's going to go partly on dealing with borrowing, partly on this fiscal headroom, having a bit of rainy day money to, spare, but also massively to basically boost benefits by inflation for everybody, above inflation for pensioners, and by, on an average of, something like £5,000 a year, but up to 14 grand a year for families who don't work or work not enough hours or on universal credit and can now not be hit by the two-child benefit cap. But the other aspect of it is the simple matter of trust in politicians. Promises made, manifesto, very clear. The Tories put out a great video yesterday, just time after time after time, of Rachel Reeves, the Prime Minister, all the shadow cabinet members saying, we're not going to put taxes up on working people. Taxes have gone up on working people. They did last year, and they did again. But the other promise made at the budget, at the dispatch box last year by Rachel Reeves, very, very, very clearly, that she would not come back for any more. That was it. She'd done the taxes. Nothing has got materially worse in the world. OK, we've had Trump tariffs and Ukraine war's not over yet, but still, nothing has got materially worse.
Well, they were foreseeable.
Yeah, they were foreseeable, yeah. That meant that she had to put tax up. So as she made it very clear, it was, quote, her choice.
I mean, she has at least stopped making these promises now. When she's if you listen to the Chancellor being quizzed on the budget now, she says things like, "I'm not going to write next year's budget." So she is at least no longer lying. But it was always ridiculous because they made all those promises during the election. Then they got into office and discovered that actually, shockingly, having the grown-ups back in the room and the Tories out of power was not in fact enough to fix the economy.
Because that was their whole thing. I think they genuinely did think it was going to be a lot easier because they were nice people. Yeah. And they were more competent.
Well, they were serious people. I mean, genuinely, the thing is that actually, in my experience, there are very few people in politics who have the kind of sort of sociopathic confidence to just straight up and deliberately lie to you all the time. Generally speaking, if a politician has been lying, the first person they've lied to is themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what happened here, because it was objectively ridiculous that they ruled out all the big revenue taxes during the general election. And then when they realised they were going to have to raise them, it was absurd for Rachel Reeves to come back and say, oh, well, I won't have to do it again. Because, as I said, you could just look at her numbers, right? And it's the same now.
Yeah.
Because her entire fiscal, she said, I've published my entire spending envelope for the entire Parliament, and it's lots of spending now, and it's lots of austerity and pay restraint just before the general election. And anyone could have just gone, that's obviously not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think, genuinely, she probably thought that would be somehow true because growth would come back.
And the thing is, I've been saying, this is a budget about protecting jobs. But the only two jobs she's trying to protect are hers and the Prime Minister's. They're intricately tied with each other. He's going to throw her under the bus when he wants. I mean, there's no doubt at all. That's your last budget, sweetheart. I mean, it's not going to... Sorry to be sexist there, Rachel. But, that is her last budget. There's no way. I mean, but she did please a load of Labour backbenchers. But interestingly, not Labour voters with things like the two-child benefit cap. Labour backbenchers are obsessed with scrapping the two-child benefit gap. This idea, we have to tackle child poverty. You tackle child poverty by parents working full-time and paying for their own kids. You tackle child poverty by telling people who already aren't working, who can't afford the kids they've already got, by suggesting to them, maybe don't have any more kids that you can't afford. And you have tax policies that encourage that decision-making. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me. They think just keep handing out money to people is mad. Bearing in mind, none of the children affected by this policy were born before the policy came in. The policy came in 2017. There was 2 years' notice, And you were told if you had more children born after 2017, they would not be getting this extra. This cap would apply to them unless you had twins or this awful. You have to say, look, if you've been raped and you had a yeah, I get that. These aren't very pleasant policies, but sometimes you need to be cruel to be kind to everybody, and that's the reality. But they are obsessed with this, even though the majority of people in this country support the two-child benefit cap, including a majority of Labour voters. Why? Because they live next door to these people and they know perfectly well that they are choosing not to work and support their own children.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not idiots. They can see them.
The reason it's been so popular is because it speaks to a fairness question, which is if you're somebody who is doing the right thing, you and your partner are both productive taxpayers, one of the third of British adults that are maybe net contributors to the Exchequer, you've had to max out on your mortgage, right, which means you both have to work, which means that...
To buy a really simple, basic house, a two-bedroom...
To buy a worse house than your parents had at your age with a longer commute, right, but you've got it. But that suddenly means your family home, you both need to work in order to sustain the mortgage, which makes having a family quite difficult. And lots of people, including people I know, are like, OK, we're having to make quite difficult financial decisions about whether or not we can afford to have another child. Yeah. And then you have people...
This isn't about going to Starbucks every day. Right. This is about major financial planning.
Because it costs about... I think the Times a couple of years ago calculated that raising a child from 0 to 18 costs 200 grand to a household, right? So that's a big investment that you have to be able to make. And it's the fairness question of people who are doing the right thing, working hard, paying lots of tax, and then they see other people who don't have to make the same calculations, right? That is always why this has been so unpopular. And on the child poverty point, it is always worth reminding people that what the left have is they have relative poverty. And relative poverty is purely an equality metric, right? Absolutely. It has nothing to do with living standards in any absolute sense. You can lift a whole bunch of people out of poverty, relative poverty, by confiscating a bunch of money from a load of other people and burning it.
You could literally make everybody in this country a millionaire, but people who have been various amount, got 1 million or 2 million or 3 million or 4 million, but the people who are living on less than 60% of the median would be counted as living in relative poverty. So they could be living in a mansion with gold thrones, but they're still living in, we'll be told they're living in poverty. I mean, it's just mad. Okay, but we come into this whole thing, it's like the whole, free school meals for like every kid in primary school in London, things like that. Not free, it's taxpayer funded. But the idea, you're giving this stuff to people who, my kid would have been entitled to this. This is insane. Why are you giving me something free? I don't need it. I can pay for my own kid. As can, in my view, every parent. And I don't believe there is a single parent in this country, and I've spoken to many on phone-ins over the years, for instance, who say, look, we've been on minimum wage all our lives, or we're on benefits, and we don't have a trouble giving our kids cereal or a piece of toast in the morning. What it is often is parents who are failing, and that's a different issue. But they never want to tackle that. They don't want to tackle things like, if you really want to tackle child poverty, you tackle worklessness, you tackle the work ethic, you tackle family breakdown. Encouraging people, teaching people how to hold down long-term relationships, to stick together, conflict resolution, and you teach people parenting skills. What kids need, yes, they need to have 3 meals a day, and they need to have their teeth brushed, and they need to have a bed to sleep in and a bedtime, and they need structure, they need healthy food. I mean, I'm sorry, none of this actually is about giving people more money. It's about helping them to help themselves. And that sounds all patronising and Lady Mark, but it's true.
I mean, you mentioned toothbrushing. This government has now decided that actually schools are going to brush children's teeth.
Don't even.
And the really exciting thing about that is, when is the government going to be first sued for a filling? Right? Because some school or other has neglected its duty to this child's teeth. And then you read about, you've seen this, the stuff about children coming into nursery and reception who aren't toilet trained.
This is something I really don't get. If you are a completely lazy mum, right, you can't bother to toilet train your kid. Okay, which, by the way, kids want to do. They want to grow up. If you haven't toilet trained your kid at 4, okay, unless there is a disability, because you always get someone to go, I know. But your average normal kid, there's nothing wrong with them, okay? If you've not, why are you shelling out an absolute fortune for nappies and the bother of changing your child's nappy, right? Why are you forking out for that? Wouldn't it be easier just to teach your kid to use the toilet? Which, by the way, everyone pretty much learns to do, so it's obviously not that hard.
It's baffling, but it also explains, one, you always get people, when I'm arguing the toothbrushing thing with the government, it's popular with parents. I'm like, but like...
Who? Which parents?
Well, like, presumably lazy parents, and that's a doom cycle.
So we're going to feed your kid, that's the thing, so we're going to pay for the roof over your head, we're going to pay for the food for your kid. We're going to pay for your child to be, you get toothbrush. And by the way, every time a teacher or anyone in school is spending time on that, they're not spending time teaching.
Well, this was going to be my other point, because we talk about, we were talking earlier, everything's expensive and rubbish. One of the reasons for that is teachers go into teaching to teach, right? And it's a great vocation, and a lot of them are absolutely fantastic people, and instead they end up picking up the slack for a whole load of work that wasn't done somewhere else. And at the other end, it's the same at universities. The number of universities now that have to do remedial maths and English for their first year students, that means that they can't focus on what they're meant to be doing. So we're still paying for it, but we're not getting the results.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a very good friend of mine who's a deputy, so he's now a head teacher of an inner city comprehensive, and those kids coming from some rough houses, and he says, I'm not a teacher. He goes, I'm a social worker come bouncer. I mean, that's basically, crowd control. That's basically what I do these days. I mean, it's all very depressing, isn't it? One person who did cheer me up yesterday was Kemi Badenoch. The Tory leader was absolutely on fire. That said, I'm going to say, Rachel Reeves, I thought her delivery yesterday was better than usual, rather more forceful. She did say some quite weird things. So this whole, my choices. And she kept referring to Madame Deputy Speaker, which is weird because it's Madam Deputy Speaker. It's just a bit weird. She's just a bit weird and awkward, isn't she? It's just very strange. Kemi Badenoch, though, absolutely on fire. Obviously helped by the fact that they had the budget in advance. She wasn't just responding to it at the time. They were obviously able to rewrite that speech. But she came out fighting. Now, one of the things we know she's obviously furious about, and I'm with her, and I think a lot of strong women are particularly annoyed about this, is a woman who's ridden to the top of her profession, Chancellor of the Exchequer, going on about, being the first woman, and then whinging about people criticising her because she's rubbish at what she does, and then saying, it's sexism, misogyny. So I was totally with her on this. You may not have caught the full Kemi Badenoch speech. Go back and watch it, because it's properly a good watch. It may change your view if you're not a big fan of the Tories and not a big fan of Kemi Badenoch's leadership. It may well change your views. Certainly a lot of Tory backbenchers were very impressed. Someone was particularly impressed at the Crewkern Gazette, which is doesn't appear to be a newspaper, it's obviously just someone on social media, and they have made but turns out turned Kemi Badenoch's speech into a budget rap. Have a quick watch and a listen of this.
All we've had from her is wallowing, wailing, self-pity speeches, victimhood, flailing, crying about misogyny, whining about mansplaining. But listen up, Kemi's here, and the roof's about to cave in.
So, Madam Deputy Speaker,
let me break it down clean. Woman to woman rate, I'll tell you what I mean. People ain't complaining because you're female on the scene. They're complaining because you run the country like a broken machine.
Yeah?
If you can't see that, I really think you find it on social media. It's absolutely worth watching, particularly in the background. Keir Starmer having a cigarette on the floor of the House of Commons.
Well, I think that used to be, at one point, I remember that was actually a weird exemption from the smoking ban that they had to cover, because smoking, the House of Commons wasn't covered by it. Yeah. So there was the prospect, if we'd only had Nigel Farage in Parliament 20 years before, he could have been the last
there with his cigar.
There with his cigar in the Commons.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the small ballot. There was a protest outside Parliament as well yesterday, farmers' protest. They were told at the very last minute, on the Tuesday late at night, when some tractors, by the way, were already on the way, they couldn't bring their vehicles into Parliament Square or to central London, and that was bad. Now, I'm of the view that people should obey the law. I know it's old-fashioned, but if we all do that, it would kind of make things nicer, wouldn't it? A lot of people say, we're already on our way. These tractors drive very slowly. They set off at early hours of the morning. You didn't realise. Some just went, sod it anyway, and turned up anyway. And they parked around Trafalgar Square and Whitehall, a lot of them. A few people got arrested. Reaching the ban. I mean, the thing is, the police were saying, look, we need to, we need to not have traffic blocked. But they're the ones who block traffic, because they block off traffic on big days like Budget Day or the opening of Parliament, and there's no traffic allowed. In fact, it's quite hard for pedestrians to walk around outside Westminster. So I thought that was a rather strange argument. What did you make of their claim that we can't possibly actually stop any, a particular, a large Muslim community demonstration in Whitechapel in East London, but we can stop UKIP, and we can stop the farmers, but we can't stop pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel protesters outside a synagogue in North London. I mean, they do seem to pick and choose when they do and don't have the powers to control protests. I mean, yeah, and you think back to during lockdown, right, when somehow they were completely incapable of preventing the Black Lives Matter protest from happening, but there was another one the week afterwards which they came down on like a ton of bricks. The anti-lockdown one. They actually went after people with batons. And I agree with you. I actually think that, I am in favour of the police having the ability to restrict protests, and I think that people should obey the law. And there is a perfectly good reason for things like, the blocking traffic, because actually the economic
economic impact of that can be absolutely enormous, right? If you bring London to a halt, it can stop emergency service vehicles.
I don't want climate, just up oil people doing it either. Yeah.
Exactly, right. But I do think that one of the really corrosive things about the way policing is starting to be seen in this country is exactly as you say, that they always go with the easy option, right? And so that means that if you've got a whole load of people who might potentially get violent, what you actually do is you move along the Jewish counter-protesters because they're not going to make a fuss. And that means that what you've done is ceded the public square to the threat of violence. And policing absolutely depends upon, especially British policing, which isn't like European policing, most of our police don't have guns or anything like that, it absolutely depends upon consent, right? And that means everyone thinks it's fair.
Yeah.
And if you get to the point where ordinary members of the public don't think that the police are fundamentally fair and on their side, our model of policing becomes impossible.
Absolutely. And again, there's lots of people pointing out, if the farmers had Palestinian flags on their tractors, carry on as you were. And the thing is, some people say that's a joke. No, I think it's probably true.
I mean, it would certainly. We don't know for certain, but possibly, because you see the very, very different way that these things are handled. And the police's argument is that what they do with the big Palestinian protests and so on is that they have cameras and then they go
get people later.
And it's like, but fine, but a part of justice is that justice is seen to be done, right? And even if you are going and arresting all these people, what ordinary people see is you doing nothing on the day.
Yeah.
And again, you're not waiting until the day afterwards to go and get the farmers or the anti-lockdown protesters, right? For them, you seem to be able to go in and make arrests at the time.
And the key thing is the reaction. Again, what's interesting, Nigel Farage has said that reform will pay for the lawyers for these detractors. Apparently, it's quite interesting because a lot of people, the police were stopping them saying, "No, you look like a farmer because you're wearing you're wearing your waxed jacket and your check shirt, so you look like a farmer. And you're not allowed to have this protest here." People go, "No, I'm just an ordinary bloke. I'm just wandering down the street," and it's very. I mean. You look like a farmer.
Sounds like profiling, doesn't it?
It does sound like profiling.
Country profiling.
You're wearing dark green
profiling.
corduroys and a waxed jacket and a check shirt.
Barbers,
I mean, it's very interesting. We're going to talk more about migration as well coming up in the next hour. I want to hear your thoughts on everything. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is a budget for Benefit Street, taking money from workers to give to shirkers. Forget the thrivers. The strivers, the strivers are the ones who've lost out completely this time round. I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:28 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's get straight to your calls on the budget. Rudy's on the line in Bristol and wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Rudy.
Hi there. I think they should have never dropped the two-child cap.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, even like with the Breakfast Club as well, because all these people seem to have all money for smoking, and boozing, but they got no money for food for their own kids.
Yeah, but I just don't believe that anybody, even on benefits in this country, doesn't have enough money to buy a box of, supermarket own brand cereal or a loaf of bread. I just simply refuse to believe that's the case.
It's not the case. If they can afford to buy cigarettes,
yeah,
then they should give up cigarettes and put it to their kids. That should be their first priority.
I agree with you. Even if you're buying one fizzy drink or a takeaway a week, you can afford to buy your kid breakfast.
Exactly, and it's just it's like you don't buy a dog if you can't afford to feed it. So don't have kids if you can't afford to bring them up and feed them.
But what about people who say, look, there are all these people, they might have had, different circumstances, that maybe, dad had a great job, or, mum worked part-time, and then, one of them got ill or lost their job, that they're...
Yeah, but if you've actually worked, Julia, then maybe. But the thing is also, they should not give any benefits to people that are not British citizens or anything like that.
I agree with
you. They should stop it completely. All these Muslim Pakistani families and Indians and Africans that are coming over here straight on having kids never do a day's work in their life. And I'll tell you something.
But if there are many who are born here who are British citizens.
I said that have come over.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I said have come over.
Yeah.
So let's get that straight. And second thing, like my niece, right? I don't have anything to do with her. In a whole over 40 years of her life, she's never had a job.
Yeah.
It's like when the benefits come down, she has another kid, and so on.
But here's the thing. Everyone, when you talk to the Labour lot about this, they're like, "Oh, you're being really snobby. You're making judgments." No, I think they are. I think they think that the people make different judgments who are at the bottom end of the pile. In fact, they make the same rational decisions as everyone else does. I'm going to have a rubbish job. I'm going to earn very little, or I can live on benefits and not have to work. It's a rational decision, which we shouldn't allow them to have that as the option. But also, I don't know anybody, and I know people from every different walk of life, from my family and friends. I don't know anyone who doesn't have at least one person they know, either in their family or someone they know very well, who isn't basically on the take and living on benefits. So we all know someone, and yet apparently, and we know could be working, but apparently we're the minority.
I'll tell you something else as well. I've got a friend that works for DWP.
Yep.
And every person she comes in, she works in fraud. Everyone that comes up is either Mohammed or they're from Slovakia, and that's all they are. She never gets any British people. Never.
So what area does she work?
I can't say.
Okay. No, fair enough. I mean, there is an issue. I've got a very good friend who also works in the benefits and who has reported that it does appear to be more the case in recent years. And again, everyone gets very uncomfortable. But, if we're talking about, people's actual experiences, that's what they are. Rudy, thank you for that call. Very hard-hitting there. Ray is on the line. He's also in Colchester. Wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Ray.
Yes, good morning to you. And may I say, what a fantastic budget that was yesterday. One that will build this country up that will make everybody who actually gets up and goes to work better off and all the rest of it.
Ray, have you got 6 kids and living on benefits? Because that sounds like you are.
You may have detected a slight bit of sarcasm in that. And listen, it was as bad as it was going to get. I mean, all those who voted Labour, and I do think every generation needs to have a Labour Party in control for at least once, so you never actually vote for them ever again. But all of those that did vote, I hope that they hang their head in shame, because this government, and I've seen some governments over the years, is by far the worst I've ever seen, and confirmed it yesterday. This wasn't a budget about building for the future or making... what this was about was the continuing rapid destruction of this country, and basically those that actually generate the wealth being made to be poor. That's what this is about, is bringing everybody down to the lowest common level, which is poverty. Labour's always done that, and that's what they're doing again here. And for all those that go out of bed this morning, went off to work, remember, you've got to work harder, because you've got some more mouths to pay for.
Absolutely, Ray, absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to say, not a Rachel Reeves fan. I'm summarising. 11:33 is the time. Thanks for those calls. Lots more messages coming. We'll get to as many calls as we can over the next hour and a half. Coming up next, though, we're going to be hearing from the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. I wonder what he makes of it all. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Henry Hill's still with me from Conservative Home. I wonder what he's got to make of what Reform UK's Deputy Leader, Richard Tice, has to say right now. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, it was certainly an exciting day yesterday. A little bit of a miserable day for people who, go out to work. We've been talking an awful lot about this as a budget for Benefit Street, taking money from workers, giving it to shirkers, taking it from strivers and giving it to skivers. Is that how you see it?
Basically, yes. And how can that be described as exciting? That was a nightmare day yesterday, frankly. I mean, all of the data was bad. Nobody's focusing enough on the dramatic declines in the growth forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility. I don't see how they're going to get to 1.5% growth in this current financial year, given the fact that we've got almost zero so far. And then all of the numbers thereafter have been downgraded. The jobs numbers are absolutely dire. Recruitment agents tell me that businesses have essentially frozen hiring, tragically, particularly of young people. But here's the really key point, Julia, that no one's focusing enough on. The borrowing numbers are through the roof. An extra £21 billion in this financial year alone, more than the OBR forecast back in the spring.
Yeah.
And the same next year and the year after. In 4 years, the borrowing's going to be over 60 billion more. And so you've got all the extra spending and the extra borrowing in the short term, and most of the tax rises come in the back of the parliamentary term. That is a cash flow disaster waiting to happen, almost guaranteeing a whole load more tax rises this time next year under a different chancellor.
Well, yeah, I don't think many people are expecting her to get to deliver third budget. Praise be God. It's a very unusual political move as well, isn't it? Although we've had, promised that from the Labour manifesto there wouldn't be any tax rises on working people. There clearly have been, both last year because of the national insurance rise, which does impact working people. I don't know why they thought it didn't, but also promised not to do it again this year. And there we have this clear tax rise with the tax thresholds going up. She made it very clear it was her choice. She kept saying my choice. The Office of Budget Responsibility making it very clear that this was not forced on her by circumstances. This was her choice to do this. And yet, you're saying, look, borrowing's up, that's bad. But the markets seem to be quite relaxed about it. You'd have thought the markets would have gone, hold on a minute, this is all terrible. The numbers don't add up. We're going to be charging more for British debt. Actually, on the contrary, the price of our debt went down.
Well, just wait. You never know quite what triggers it. But as the monthly data continues to get worse, and I think sometimes the markets, they place over-reliance in the OBR. I sometimes call them the Office for Incompetent Forecasting, given the wide variations. But just you watch these borrowing numbers over the next few months, and if they keep exceeding the OBR forecasts, and if the growth does not meet those forecasts, you are going to see a painful double whammy. And when the markets turn, it gets very painful very quickly when they get what's called herd instinct.
Yeah, well, it was very interesting when we saw Rachel Reeves sort of hitting back about Liz Truss. You think, have you seen the borrowing figures compared to when Liz Truss was in charge yesterday? In terms of what was, I suppose, the worst stuff that you heard from the Chancellor yesterday, what really sort of stuck in your craw?
Well, the bottom line is that it pays to stay at home. Benefit payments are up, and those who set their alarm at 5 or 6 in the morning, they're all being penalised. Real disposable income per household is down every single year. Real disposable income is now no higher than it was in 2008. We've had essentially 20 years of actually negative disposable income. That's why working people feel poorer.
Yeah.
And if you keep raising benefits that, of course, are tax-free, and you keep freezing income tax thresholds on those who do work, you've got a desperate double whammy where essentially it no longer pays to go to work, and that's what we're seeing. So it's a budget for Benefit Street, but as in terms of growth, making work pay, making risk-taking, being an entrepreneur, a small business owner pay, frankly, many people are not going to bother, and many people are saying, I'm off to the golf course or I'm fleeing the country.
Well, and that's one of the big worries. And we know, 250,000 people last year did leave the country. And we've also got the latest migration figures suggesting an awful lot of people come to the country. It's going down. And the figures are, there are quite a whole range of figures. But net migration to the UK has dropped by 2/3. It's the lowest figure in 4 years, we're told. It's still, of course, absolutely sky high, with an estimated 204,000 more people coming to the country than leaving the country in the 12 months to June. Now, a lot of this actually is not down to what has happened since the Labour Party got in July 24. It's down to what Rishi Sunak did when it was exposed. We'd had the Boris wave. But what do you make of those figures? Are they at least going in the right direction?
I tell you what I'm making. I'm claiming credit for them, and Reform UK is claiming credit because we made such a song and dance 12 to 24 months ago that actually the Tories changed tack and essentially made some, completely reverse their previous uncontrolled open borders process. That was purely because of the pressure from Reform UK. So look, the numbers are in the right direction. They've got a long way further to go, but don't be deceived. In addition to those numbers, I think there's another 110,000 asylum claims from all sorts of people, where they've come here on a boat or come here with a student visa and then claimed asylum. So the numbers are still way, way too high. And the last thing we need is more people in this country. We've got to get our own people back into work.
Well, that's the thing, actually. Predictions from the Office of Budget Responsibility yesterday, whether we're actually going to see rising net migration to 340,000 by the end of the decade. But actually, an awful lot of the fall isn't a fall in the number of people coming, it's a rise in the number of people leaving. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who are coming are low-skilled, low-wage migrants from, let's face it, the third world. And a lot of the people who are leaving are people, entrepreneurs, people who are entrepreneurial and aspirational and high earners who are fleeing higher taxes. So the one in, one out, it doesn't work for us economically, does it?
Well, that's why we say that no overseas nationals should be paid any benefits whatsoever, because if we're told that people need to come here to work to fill the jobs, well, the clue's in the name work. Either work or in the nicest possible way. It doesn't help us as an economy. It doesn't help us as a nation. So we want high-skilled, highly qualified people who speak the language, who integrate into the communities in numbers we can absorb, and then everyone's a winner. Otherwise, this thing doesn't work. And that's before, by the way, the impact of AI in terms of the quantity of, for example, white-collar jobs. We'll get through it, but it is a significant shift it's another whole industrial revolution. And the last thing we need is more people. We've got to get our own people back into work and make sure that we can keep people in work using AI.
But we're told we do need more people. What we specifically need is more working age people, particularly more children, to become the next working age generation to fund all of us when we are in our retirement. Because as we know, we don't have a pot for most of us that just sits there all, in the treasury in the corner. Oh, that's the one for Richard and that's the one for Julia. It's actually money that's being spent day to day. So we need to have more children. In which case, do you not support measures in the budget? I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, Richard, but measures in the budget which are encouraging people to have more children by paying, for instance, an extra $3,500 a year to parents on universal credit who can't afford their kids to look after the kids they do have if they have got more than two.
Well, the key is in the word work. And so we want more British-born children who are part, essentially, of working where you've got two working families, but on low incomes, and many people are working, doing critical jobs for the economy, but on low incomes. They shouldn't be denied the ability to have children. So that's why we've said have a targeted focus on low-income working parents, where you've got two parents at work. That's what we want to do.
Two parents working full-time?
Yeah, that sort of thing, and you can look at
not that sort of thing. Either two parents working full-time or two parents work... I mean, it's not a mystery why people who work part-time or one of two people work part-time, they can't pay their bills, is it? While everyone else is striving, doing a 40-hour week.
The key clue is in the word work and the incentive to work, and people who want to contribute to their community by working and to our economy by working. That's where we're at on that. But overall, if you don't make work pay and you don't make entrepreneurs, if you don't give them a reward for taking the risk, then we're not going to get any GDP growth, and we're heading towards a major drama.
I'm interested in Nigel Farage offering to pay the legal fees for the 80 farmers who were arrested yesterday, that protest outside Parliament. Well, they were banned from being outside Parliament with tractors. A number of tractors and farm vehicles were brought to the capital in breach of that order, which came very late in the day. Why is Nigel Farage offering that?
Because it was absolutely disgraceful, the treatment of the farmers. They'd been told for weeks that they could have a lawful, peaceful protest. The last time they came to London, they left the streets cleaner than they found them in the morning. And the reality is that because the farmers didn't want to fly pro-Palestine flags on their tractors, they weren't allowed, because it might be a bit embarrassing for the Chancellor and the Prime Minister. And one chap was arrested for blowing the horn of his tractor. I mean, for heaven's sake, what's going on? So we've said, and we will be helping a number of those arrested with their legal fees. We just think it's wrong. It was a political decision by the senior management of the Met Police for all the obvious reasons.
Is it two-tier policing?
It's two-tier policing, it's two-tier justice, and we're going to make sure that those farmers can get all the legal assistance that they require.
Can I also ask you one final question just about the more than 53,000 illegal migrants who are missing? The leaked document headed Absconder Pool from the Home Office was released last night, showing they've got 53,000 illegal migrants, some of whom are actually foreign offenders being released from prison, supposed to be in detention, supposed to have been deported. Just they're here in Britain. Don't know where they are. We don't know what they're doing. What do you make?
Well, we do know what they're doing, actually. We do know what they're doing. They're on every high street. They're working illegally, whether it's in barber shops, vape shops, mini-marts, car washes, you name it, they're there. In plain sight, the degree of criminality and money laundering. I first broke it as a presenter on Talk about 3 years ago.
Yes.
And I got a whole load of abuse for it. But, I mean, the switchboard lit up. And people were saying, I've suddenly got a dozen barbers on a small high street in a market town. And I know COVID was dramatic, but it didn't make our hair grow faster.
Thank you very much, Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Henry Hill from Conservative Home listening to that. Very full-throated response to the budget there. What do you make of it?
I think one of the interesting things actually about the difference between Reform UK and the Conservatives, which we might see starting to play out over the next few years, is that if you look at the seats where they're competitive, Reform came second in 98 seats at the general election. 89% of them are Labour held. Some of the seats with the highest levels of government spending in the country are held by Reform UK. So for Kemi Badenoch, it's actually there's a fairly easy conventional Tory line about smaller state, lower taxes. For Nigel Farage and Reform UK, that's going to be a slightly harder needle to thread.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to the brilliant Sir Bill Browder about where we are with these latest so-called peace talks for Ukraine. That's up next. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. Well, we're going to leave the issues of the budget and migration briefly to talk about, well, international affairs, which of course have a big impact on our cost of living. We saw what happened with the invasion of Ukraine, didn't we, with the effect on our energy bills and indeed on public borrowing. It all ties in. But we're going to talk right now about where we are in the state of affairs, whether there is or there is not a peace plan for Ukraine. Let's talk to Sir Bill Browder. He's Putin's #1 foreign enemy, proudly so, and head of the global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Good morning to you once again, Sir Bill.
Great to see you.
Thanks for joining us. Look, we were told this 28-point plan from America, brackets Russia, really written by the Kremlin quite clearly, and then we were told there's a 19-point plan from the Europeans. There's been lots of talks, everyone's met up, Zoom meetings in Geneva. What's actually going on, and is there something of a plan that could actually bring peace to Ukraine?
Very simply, no. There's not going to be, at least from these efforts, peace in Ukraine. As you mentioned, there was a 28-point peace plan, and peace is probably not the right word to use for that plan. It was drafted in the Kremlin, translated from Russian into English, handed to Steve Witkoff, the President Trump's advisor.
Golf buddy.
He's a real estate guy, not a diplomat. I don't believe Trump even read the 28-point plan. He then sort of boldly announced that Ukraine had a week to agree to it. And if Ukraine didn't, then the U.S. would cut off military intelligence, which has been very helpful in preventing deaths in Ukraine. The whole world got to see this plan. It was completely outrageous in every respect.
I mean, it all but asked for Zelensky to give up his firstborn child, didn't it? I mean, it was
outrageous. It was outrageous. It was infuriating. It was so infuriating that I believe 87% of Republicans in America thought it was awful.
Wow.
I mean, it was just terrible. So, and then some more grown-up people got involved. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who has his head screwed on right, got to Geneva to discuss this with the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians, of course, didn't want to say we reject it outright because they didn't want to offend Trump, who's easily offended by all sorts of random things. And so they said, of course, we will work with this plan. And then they started crossing out all the offensive stuff, adding some stuff that they thought might make it possible to have a peace deal. There's now a 19-point plan, which bears very little resemblance to the 28-point plan. And the 19-point plan is completely not going to be accepted by Putin because I don't think Putin would have even accepted the 28-point plan.
He just wanted to put something on the table that Ukraine had to say no to. But isn't this all about, well, not about peace. It's certainly not about the Ukrainian people. So much of this is about sort of playing games with Donald Trump and sort of stroking the ego of the Sun King. That's not Trump derangement syndrome. He clearly needs it. And we can see this from this leaked document, which appears to show two leaked conversations showing this envoy, coaching Putin's most senior foreign policy advisor, Yuri Yushakov, on how to present a peace proposal to Donald Trump and how to basically talk him round. I mean, it seems to me it's extraordinary that the US president's aide would be advising a hostile nation's president's aide how to talk to his boss.
Well, I'm old enough to remember the times when that would have been treason. We seem to be in a different state of affairs right now. The most important thing that has happened, which nobody has paid any attention to, is that Putin has played everybody. And he's played everybody in one very important respect, which is that the war wasn't ending, Putin wasn't withdrawing from Ukraine, and what was building up were very serious sanctions that would have put a complete kibosh on his economy.
And these are the sort of the second-tier sanctions on countries like India, where if you do buy Russian oil, that's your choice, but then you're going to hit 50% tariffs from America.
Or 500% tariff.
Now we're talking. Which is, by the way, what we should have done in 2022.
and we should do it at any moment right now. But as a result of all this supposed peace negotiations, Trump there's no way he's going to impose those sanctions. And then Putin has bought himself another 3 or 6 months until there's another one of these blow-ups.
Yeah.
So who's won out of this whole thing? Putin has won because he wins every day, even if he's losing 1,000 men a day.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
He doesn't care, and he's betting that we're all going to give up or we're all going to throw in the towel.
And he's right, because this is a problem with the West. People get bored, voters get bored, politicians get bored, economic times are hard. Goodness knows what China's going to do in Taiwan. We've got Taiwan preparing for invasion as early as 2027 now. They've made that very clear. There is no doubt at all that the Western will to fight a long-fought war, and by the way, the best part of 4 years isn't a long war, is weak, and he knows it.
He knows it, and he's playing us like a fiddle. So he's gotten rid of these oil sanctions, which would put him out of business in 6 months.
And again, that wouldn't involve, America providing weapons or America, Britain or France or anyone else putting men on the ground, risking their blood. This is really straightforward. Just explain just briefly, just what would they have to do?
It's very simple. So at the moment, how does Putin afford the war? He sells crude oil. They pump a lot of crude oil and they sell it abroad. Who buys the crude oil? China, India, and Turkey. Yeah. But it's not even China, India, and Turkey. It's like 2 refineries in China, 4 in India, and 2 in Turkey. The easy way to stop the money flowing to Putin so he can no longer afford the war is to sell those refineries. We understand that you like to get cheap oil. Who wouldn't? Yeah. But if you want to get that cheap oil, you'll not do any more business with us. We won't buy from you. We won't sell to you. We won't bank you. We won't transport you. We won't insure you. And you know what? Those 8 businesses will say, you know what? I'd rather carry on doing business with the rest of the world than get a bit of cheap Russian oil. And at that point, Putin no longer can sell his oil. His revenues drop by 80%. And then he'll be begging for us to do a peace negotiation in 6 months.
I've only got about 30 seconds left, but briefly, why don't the West do that?
Well, because Putin keeps on, playing Trump, and he comes up with these peace plans and nonsense and Anchorage, Alaska, red carpet summits. And every time he does that, Trump thinks he's negotiating, and he's not negotiating anything.
The art of the deal. I mean, there we are. Sir Bill Browder, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us, head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Henry Hill, just briefly, it's so frustrating. We could stop this war with no more bloodshed if we wanted.
I suppose my only concern there would be the same problem we have with all of these sanctions, which is arbitrage, right? Because all of a sudden, what happens is those refineries, they just sell it to someone else who then sells it to us, right?
Yeah, well, and we've been doing that. Yeah,
exactly.
Germany's the worst offender. They're still buying Russian gas quite happily, aren't they?
So I think that's the issue with it, right?
I think it's not beyond the wit of man, and we could do it. But again, there's just not the political will. It really is quite extraordinary. It's just coming up to the top of the hour. Coming up, we're going to get the latest headlines. Then we're going to be talking to journalist and broadcaster, the brilliant Andrew Neil, get his take on the budget. We're also going to be talking about that horrific Liverpool rampage horror and the trial where yesterday the driver admitted his guilt on this shocking move. And we're also going to be talking about why we're not going to actually have the whole of Gaza turning up in this country. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk. We're the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connection device, thank you so much for your company. And don't forget, as you've probably been hearing the whole of the last week, our talkTV app will be no more next Monday. That's the 1st of December, extraordinarily, but it's going to become the Talk app. But you're going to have to download the new app. If you're able to download the first one, you can do this one. It's not an issue, but you'll still be able to get all of your favourite shows and the podcasts as well. So keep on watching, keep on listening. Lots more chat coming in the next hour before I hand over to Ian Collins. And let's face it, most of the chat is about the budget. Extraordinary announcements yesterday, which were a blatant breach of manifesto pledges and indeed a breach of promises the Chancellor made only last year at her first budget, where she said she wasn't going to come back for more money. But Rachel Reeves delivered a budget that was a budget for Benefit Street, taking money from workers to give to shirkers, from the strivers to give to the skivers. It's not gone down very well, apart from on the Labour backbenchers, because they're so happy they're going to give more money to people who don't work or only work part-time to have more kids. What a brilliant, brilliant decision that is. That £30 billion tax bomb has been dropped on Britain, and it is busy exploding all over the place. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to be talking about the former Royal Marine, Paul Doyle, who surprisingly pleaded guilty yesterday in the second day of his trial over driving into Liverpool's Premier League title celebrations earlier this year. We'll talk about that. Plus, fantastic good news for once on the Home Affairs front. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has overturned a human rights ruling that granted Palestinians fleeing Gaza refuge in Britain that could have led to, well, basically pretty much anyone who's ever known anyone vaguely in Britain being able to come here. So that's at least some good news. But let's face it, there isn't much of it. Well, joining me throughout the show, I'm delighted to say, has been Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of the Conservative Home. We have shuffled him along to make way for our next guest, who I'm delighted to say is journalist and broadcaster Andrew Neil. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Always great to get your analysis.
Here in person.
Here in person. Well, yeah, now you are actually on a sister station, obviously, and you were presenting a budget show yesterday, as I was, and I'm sure you were enjoying the fun and games as much as I was when, even before the Prime Minister was answering questions at PMQs, we got pretty much the whole budget delivered to us by someone accidentally pressing send on an email from the Office for Budget Responsibilities. You've covered a lot of budgets, you've covered a lot of elections, you've been, with all due respect, around a long time. What did you make of just that aspect of the budget?
It was
yesterday?
unique. It never happened before. I mean, I've covered almost every budget since...
time immemorial.
The Geoffrey Howe. Actually, before that even. I used to do Dennis Healy's budgets on the BBC Newsnight. Remember Newsnight?
That was used to be a thing.
It was in the days when people actually watched the BBC, and we had 12 million people. It's unprecedented, but you know, it was kind of par for the course because we already knew what was in the budget.
Yes.
To an unprecedented level. We've never had this much intentional leaking before, and lo and behold, the OBR, the Blue Book as they call it, drops, and in that Blue Book, because their forecasts are based on what's in the budget, it told us what was in the budget. So we knew there was going to be a mansion tax. Personal allowances were going to be frozen yet again. This time for another 3 years. There was going to be electrical vehicle tax. We knew she was going to borrow more, tax more, spend more. So it basically told us everything.
It was an extraordinary scene, and of course we got this apology from the OBR. What we really want, though, is an apology from the Chancellor, who made a very big deal about, in her speech and in interviews today, about how these were her choices. Were they the right choices that she made yesterday?
Well, I'm not sure they were all her choices, actually. I think they were Keir Starmer's 10 Downing Street played a bigger role in this than in the previous budget, because I think Starmer worked out that his future depends on this coming right just as much as the Chancellor's.
It was a budget for jobs, but the jobs involved were Keir Starmer's and Rachel Reeves.
These are the two ones that mattered most of all. Hence, it was a budget basically geared to the soft left. which dominates the Parliamentary Labour Party now. Hence the reason it was essentially an old-style Labour tax and spend budget. It was back to the 1970s.
The trouble with this, there was a manifesto pledge back in 2024, and the Tories put out a video, which, I mean, just, you know, time after time after time that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer and other cabinet ministers said they were not going to be raising taxes on working people. Now, this morning, Rachel Reeves came, well, you know, there was another clause after that, not raising the rates of any of the income tax rates or national insurance.
But that's
or
not
VAT.
what she said on camera.
It's not what she said repeatedly, but also there was a promise last year that she wouldn't come back for more. So we've had two breaches. How significant is that breach, other than the fact that, look, we're all cynical hacks, we don't trust anything any politicians say, but if voters can't trust anything that is written in black and white in a manifesto, is told to our faces by a would-be Prime Minister, by a would-be Chancellor, how dangerous is that?
It's hugely significant because it means that Britain has a government which it didn't vote for. Britain voted for a moderate centre-left Labour Party, which said it was not going to increase taxes, other than a few bespoke ones, VAT on school fees, taxing the non-doms, a couple of others, which between them would bring in about 10 billion. But there would be no overall increase in taxation, and she would run a very tight ship when it came to public spending. Well, instead, what we have is, if you take her budget last year and the budget this year, we've had the biggest increase in tax of any government since the 1970s. And we have public spending now up at 45% of GDP. Now, nobody voted for any of this at all. And that's why it is important, because it's almost the opposite of what Labour said it would do in power. Now, some of us pointed out at the time that it was unlikely to stick to these manifesto promises, but even so, that's what they said.
They stuck to it. Well, Keir Starmer,
and I think it's bad for democracy, because these are fundamental changes. I mean, let me just try and explain. You know, budgets come and budgets go. This is a watershed budget. This is a budget which bakes in all the tax increases and all the extra public spending of the pandemic, and then adds more. Adds more tax, more spending, and something totally undercovered in the press today, even more borrowing. A ton more borrowing on top of what she planned to do when she added a ton more borrowing in October of last year. And so Britain is now a different country. Britain is now, ironically, having voted for Brexit, when it comes to the scale of taxation, the highest tax burden in our history, and the level of public spending, 45% of GDP, that makes us a European economy. That makes us.
How's that working for them?
It's going very well. They've had at least 0.5%.
Hold on a minute, Andrew Neil. Is that all Brexit's fault?
Yeah, well,
that's what we keep being told.
The ironic thing is that as Britain voted for Brexit in 2016, we have never been more like Europe. And what this does is it bakes in Britain now as a European-style social democracy.
But the contrast to that is that, and Henry Hill, you and I are discussing this morning, is you've got this issue where you've got you know, we're paying sky-high taxes like a lot of other European countries, but as Henry was pointing out, unlike a lot of those Scandinavian countries which do have these sky-high taxes, we don't have public services to match. So there is a general acceptance in a lot of those countries. You pay a lot of money, but you get good public services and lots of benefits back. But we don't get.
And that's true. By and large, public services in social democratic Europe are of a better quality. I mean, the health service in France is far superior to the NHS. As I split my time between the UK and France, I make sure if I'm going to get ill, I get ill in France and not here. So there's no question about that. But that's our own fault. And you know, we're the ones that create these public services. We're the ones that run them. And by the way, it's not going to get any better, because this government will not do the changes necessary in the public service. Let me just give you one figure. Productivity in the NHS is now 20% lower than it was before the pandemic. If you simply
huge extra sums of money, huge number of more staff.
If you simply returned the NHS to the productivity level of 2019, you could cut taxes. It'd be worth another £50 billion to the NHS. And they're never going to change that, because they're in thrall to the public sector unions that basically control productivity in the public sector, And they're not going to change that. They're running scared of the soft left. They ain't going to take on the public sector unions.
And it's very interesting. And again, you come to the two-child benefit cap. That was something that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were arguing against. They took the whip away from some rebels who voted for it earlier this year. Keir Starmer's made a statement in the last 10 minutes or so.
Okay,
yes. He said the budget was fair and necessary. And he said, in response to accusations that Labour has broken Labour manifesto pledges, he said, we kept our manifesto in terms of what we promised. I accept the challenge we have asked everyone to contribute. That is because we need to protect our NHS, that phrase again, and to make sure we have money to put into our schools. But it's interesting, there wasn't anything about extra money for the NHS or schools. It was money for benefits.
Yeah, and by the way, since Labour came in, we poured billions more into the NHS on top of the billions that the Tories poured in during the pandemic and kept after the pandemic was over. And the consequence of that is the waiting list, which was 7.6 million in July of last year, are now 7.4 million. So in almost 18 months, they've come down by only 200,000, despite extra billions going in. There is going to be no proper reform of the public service. AI is going to take over the private sector, and the public sector is going to become an antediluvian museum while the private sector.
But to be fair, someone's got to order the fax machines in the pages.
Oh, well,
someone's got to keep them in business.
In fact, someone just asked me to send a fax, and I had to look up my dictionary. Find out what does that mean?
I tried to explain that to my teenager a few weeks ago.
Can I zoom past the British Museum before I catch a flight?
But look, this is something, and I know you've talked about this an awful lot as well in the past. I mean, we are looking at particularly, this idea that, if you work hard and you do the right thing and you go to work every day, alarm clock Britain, the strivers, the workers, that life is going to get better for you. But since 2008, we have seen no increase whatsoever after inflation in people's standard of living since 2008 for the average worker. That is very, very telling. However, we did see yesterday, benefits going up by inflation, minimum wage, things people going up by way above inflation, pensions going up by, thanks to the triple lock, above inflation, student loans. They're not having that. But crucially, and the biggest tax take that we saw yesterday was, of course, the freezing of the thresholds at which you start paying basic rate tax at 20%, and which you move to the higher rate tax at 40%, and to the top rate at 45%. We've now got an extraordinary that 1 in 4 people now are higher or above rate taxpayers.
Yeah, for
7% some years ago.
Well, for a tax rate, when Nigel Lawson, one of the budgets I covered, when Nigel Lawson introduced the 40% tax rate, he made it clear it was for people who earn big bucks.
It was the super rich.
And you could have no deductions. I mean, in the old days, you paid a marginal rate of 83%, but you could deduct everything. Lunches in the city, mortgage.
Oh, the good old days.
You could deduct your mortgage from it as well. Buy a yacht. You could, of course, you could. First mortgage
tax,
first mortgage I got, I could deduct all the interest on it. So it made it possible to do that. So 40%, no deductions. If you earn more than a certain amount, 40% of your income goes to the extra, goes to the Treasury. That was for people on the big bucks. And I think what we've seen now is a real unfairness, because if that when Rishi Sunak froze the threshold at 12,250 or thereabouts, so that was your tax-free personal allowance. If that had continued to be indexed against inflation, what would it be worth today? 15,500. You can make 15,500 pounds before you paid tax.
As opposed to 12.5 grand.
Right. Assuming inflation continued the way the OBR says, by 2030 it will be worth 17,300 pounds. A real boost to people on low incomes not having to pay tax. But instead, what we have after yesterday is that people who get up, work hard, often for not big salaries, do their best, their thresholds are frozen, they're paying more in real terms, but if you're on benefits, they're all index linked. And I think that fact will come back to haunt
Well,
the
this is it,
government.
because the Labour benches were cheering this on. They were very, very keen on
it's
this.
the
And there's no
welfare
doubt,
party.
and there's
It
no
is the
doubt at all
welfare party.
that's who Rachel Reeves was trying to please yesterday. But Labour voters, like every other voter, on average, don't support it. Now, the Labour voters are the least supportive of keeping the cap, but nevertheless, more than half of Labour voters wanted to keep that cap. And my guess is because they live near people and they know people who are in this situation. They've got a load of kids they can't afford, they're not working full-time or if at all, and they're wondering why the heck they're expected to pay more taxes to pay for them. Is the Chancellor, our Labour MPs, are they just massively out of touch, or were they doing this, as many suspect, because the largest number of families, or the communities in this country who do have, 4, 5, 6 plus kids and would benefit the most from this axing of the cap are families of ethnic minorities, particularly Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Black African and also Afro-Caribbean, and they tend to live in largely Labour voting constituencies. Was this just literally a bung to their own voters?
That may have been the consequence of it, but I think it's also they believe in this. They believe in an expanding welfare state. The purpose of government is to redistribute in favour of welfare. That is their modus operandi. And that is why, to save their own skins, Mr Starmer and Ms Reeves kowtowed to the backbench. This is now a government walking a tightrope between the soft left on the Labour backbenches and the gilt markets, keeping a wary eye on how much are they going to borrow.
They seem to be not particularly bothered.
It takes a while.
So far.
It takes a while. Unless you're as stupidly reckless as Liz Truss, it takes a while to sink in. But they're working out now, all these tax rises are backloaded, and that's only what makes the figures eventually come right, because they're borrowing a ton more. In last year, this year and next year, she will borrow 50 billion more than she even planned to do in March of this year.
It's just mind-blowing, the numbers.
And when they work out that it's backloaded, and here's the other politically stupid thing, which won't happen. All these big tax rises, including the biggest, the personal allowance frozen again for 3 years, they click in a year before the election.
Yeah.
Do you think Labour's going to proceed with all these tax rises a year before? I mean, there'll be political suicide. Now, there may be an election beforehand. I suspect Mr Starmer and Ms Reeves will be long gone by then anyway, but it doesn't pass the smell test on this.
What do you think they're going to do then?
Labour? They will draw breath, think the budget's been a success. Starmer and Reeves live to fight another day. And then bit by bit, because what we know now is that smorgasbord is actually a Swedish word for omnishambles. Bit by bit, it will unravel. And the revenues they say they'll get will turn out not to be. The gilt markets will notice that and say, hey, hold on, what's happening here? And looming up in May next year are elections which Labour will lose in England, Scotland, and Wales. And that is when the balloon goes up.
Yeah. So this is really all about, they hope, short-term political gain or just
it was a budget for survival.
Budget for survival, but the rest of us are left picking up the bill.
To survive.
Yes, but things are. I mean, things aren't. I just want to ask you about two other taxes that sort of really struck me. One was about the paying per mile tax on electric vehicles. I've got to be honest, I did chuckle a bit about that, on the basis that I've been saying for years, like when you get your free parking, your free congestion charge, and you're not paying fuel duty, you buy your electric vehicle. As soon as more people have got electric vehicles, there's going to be less fuel duty coming in. It's a crucial part of the budget. So, of course, they're going to put taxes up. But the mansion tax, now, it doesn't affect many people, probably affects some people we know, people, lucky 100,000 people who've got mansions or possibly even flats worth 2 million quid or more. That is being seen as, well, it's a tax on the wealthy, but it's already being slated as a tax that may end up costing more to administer than it brings in.
Both the EV, the tax on EV, and the so-called mansion tax are simply the product of a desperate scramble for revenues. When you rule out income tax increases, which are predictable, immediate, and substantial, you're then left to scramble for a whole litany of smaller taxes, the smorgasbord.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. There's a huge case for reforming road tax, road tax, because in the long run, the tax on fuel isn't going to hack it.
Yeah.
There's a huge case for reforming property taxes. Yep. Property taxes in Britain are ludicrous, based on 1991 prices.
Yeah. And Buckingham Palace pays the same council tax as someone in quite ordinary house.
In Britain are undertaxed. Yep. I mean, I've paid property taxes in 3 countries, Britain, France, and America. My most expensive property was in London. It had the lowest property tax by far.
Yeah.
But that's different from just scrabbling and saying, oh, I'll get another 100 million there, 100 million there. And this, in the end, was what was totally bereft in this budget. In a scramble for tax and spend, there were no reforms, no supply side reform, no efforts to make Britain more efficient, to function better, to attract inward investment, to get British business to invest more, to lubricate the labour market to get unemployment down.
To grow the economy, the OBR said.
The economy, as they once said. And the interesting thing is, I've just been looking at the figures, that we all know, Keir Starmer, I'm growth, that's all I'm in. Well, the OBR in the final Tory budget said by 2029 the economy would be 9% bigger than it was in March 24.
Mm-hmm.
The sums done yesterday, it'll only be 7% bigger.
Ouch.
In other words, even growth.
Both are dire, but it's even worse.
Exactly, 9% sounds right home about.
Happy Thursday, everybody.
I'm leaving for New York this afternoon, so I hope you enjoy yourselves.
And you, Neil,
I may not come back.
That's the worry, that a lot of people won't come back, particularly our young'uns. Journalist and broadcast, the brilliant Andrew Neil, thank you very much indeed. Up next, we're going to take your calls. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on the budget. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:26 is the time. Henry Hill's still with us, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Fascinated to get Andrew Neil's take, especially on the budget, having covered so many budgets over the years, even more than me. That's how old he is. But he really knows his stuff and he knows his numbers. And just talk about this, like, so even as bad as it is, it's going to get worse. That's kind of the message I took from what Andrew Neil said. We don't even have the full horror yet.
Well, because none of it has done anything to change the fundamental trajectory of the economy, which is ageing population, runaway revenue expenditure, not enough working age people, paying too much tax.
No
already.
productivity,
exactly,
no growth,
no wage growth since the old.
Everyone having a nice day.
There hasn't been real wage growth in the entire time that I've been working in the economy, and I think sometimes the problem is when we talk about the bond markets, right? Is that yes, a bond market crisis would immediately topple a government, but sometimes
as we know.
Well, indeed.
Hi, Liz Truss.
And I think that we sometimes therefore make the mistake of assuming that if the bond markets aren't panicking, we're being well governed.
Yeah.
When actually the only thing that means is that the bond markets think they'll get their money back. Now, almost 40% of all bonds they're called short-term conventional gilts, which is a maximum of 5 years. More of them are 10 years. They're not saying that in 20 years' time Britain's not going to be a complete bonfire.
Yeah.
They're saying they'll have got their money out by then and nothing else.
You make a very fair point. This is, it just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? I've covered many a budget over the years, and nearly always you'll say, oh, this is good, and yay, cheer, cheer, cheer. And then afterwards, you go back, you have the huddle outside in the lobby with all the journalists watching, and then the special advisor to the chancellor's outside, and you're looking through the numbers, and then you get the bad news, and it comes out over the next few hours or days. We had kind of like all the bad news on the floor of the House yesterday, and it's not good, but it's going to play out over the next few years in a very bad way.
Yeah, so it's the bizarre thing about the fact that they started leaking budgets, right, which is previously nobody did.
Yeah,
and that meant you've
really
got all the good and bad news on the same time. And then the Conservatives did this. They started leaking all the good news. And so you've got a couple of weeks of good news stories. But then all that meant was the only thing the journalists had to write about the day after the budget was everything wrong with it.
But also, I don't like the idea of anything, we're trying to say we're going to put income tax up by 1 or 2 pence the pound, or we're not going to put it up. But these things being decided on a whim. There's no thought through philosophy, no thought through, economic theory or no plan. And as one of my guests said the other day, it's not just they've got a plan and they're not sticking to it. They haven't got a plan and they're not sticking to it.
Well,
it's that bad. Well, let's go to the calls. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on Rachel Reeves delivering a budget for Benefit Street, taking money from workers to give to shirkers, from strivers to give to skivers. Let's talk to Matthew, who is in Cheshire. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Good day to you.
Lovely to talk to you. What do you want to say?
Yesterday, Rachel, with an abacus, stood at the dispatch box and basically stuck 2 fingers up and blew a big raspberry at all working class people in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
What she did was a disgrace. You might as well just rip up the manifesto, say whatever you want, and just screw everyone who works, because that was absolutely disgraceful. The only thing she's done is put any Labour voter who's got any ounce of sense voting towards either reform or maybe the Tories, because the Conservative leader did an excellent job, and that might just split reform up. That's the only problem. We need a strong right-wing party, whether it's reform or Tories, to set this Labour shambles to task.
Well, I had quite a few Tories say to me, and I said, well, you lot deserve to be out of office last July. And they said, oh, careful what you wish for. And I said, oh, no, I'm fully aware there's going to be a Labour government. I think the country needs a dose. I think people need to have a little bit of a memory. And I think the Labour Party needed to have a little bit of experience of, oh, look, it turns out governing's quite difficult. You have to make difficult choices and do the right thing. And you can't just keep saying, spend more on this, spend more on this. It doesn't work. The numbers don't add up.
Well, she's walking around on TV. She won't come on that. You won't come on talk to you.
No.
She won't speak to talk, because you know that you would tear her a new one. You would make. She'd be crying like a little baby.
Everyone said that Kemi was brutal yesterday. I can assure you, I would be more brutal. Genuinely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
I'd pay good money to watch you have a go at her.
Let's try and see if we can make that happen, eh? Matthew, thank you very much. But of course, that would just be us being sexist, wouldn't it? Now, you know what you're waiting for, people. You know what you want to hear on the budget. Georgina from London is on the line. Georgina, take it away.
Well, good afternoon, Julia. Good afternoon, Henry. I was dreading Rachel Reeves's Bedlam budget, and just as I thought, the budget was indeed total madness. Instead of helping and easing the financial burden on the working man, all Reeves has done is appease the Labour backbenchers and increase the already gargantuan welfare debt by adding 43 new tax rises on the working man, breaking yet another Labour promise. Britain is now, instead of being a sovereign nation, Julia, is a mirror image of the European Union. It is as if Brexit had never happened. Yet again, the working man has been penalised for getting up at the crack of dawn to go out to work, whilst people who claim welfare can lie in bed knowing that this government will make sure they don't go without. Instead of giving incentives for people to come out of the benefit system, they have actively encouraged them to stay at home, have more children that they can't afford, and every taxpayer is forced to contribute to their children's upbringing, knowing that the majority of these offspring will go on to themselves to sign up to the welfare system when they are of age. Welfare is not and should never be a lifestyle choice. It should be a permanent solution or alternative to a proper job. It's wrong. It's there purely to help those that genuinely cannot work and need governmental help to survive. But why would they want to work when the benefits given by the Labour Party outweigh an honest day's pay? This is pure insanity. Until we have a proper government that rewards the working man, we are going to continue in this economic death spiral. Our economy will continue to crumble and our growth stagnate. We are on a direct path to certain bankruptcy. We will continue with our endless borrowing. Inflation has not been addressed and has been given steroids to further exacerbate. We need to cut benefits to get the welfare bill down so as to cut taxes. This has not happened. We need to lower the cost of living. This has increased, and every working household will feel the long-reaching ramifications of this Bedlam budget.
Absolutely, Georgina. I mean, you absolutely nailed it. We could put you in the House of Commons tomorrow. I'm serious. I need you to stand for public office, Georgina.
Bless your heart. You know what? I'm seriously considering standing for public office.
Yes.
That's what because
Come
things
on.
are getting from bad to worse, Julia.
Vote.
And we can't go on like
Vote Georgina. Vote early, vote often. That's all I can say. Thank you very much indeed for that. 12:33 is the time. Henry's just sitting there absolutely stunned.
I mean, I could go for Parliament so you don't steal my job. Yeah, that was a whole thing. Not a single right?
No.
You're perfectly delivered.
So that's fine. I don't even bother. So take it away. It's the only... Always. She nails it every single time. 12:33 is the time. Up next, we're going to find out about why we suddenly had such a big change in the court case involving the horrific driving into that Liverpool victory parade when we saw the former Royal Marine suddenly changing his plea to guilty to injuring all those people. We'll talk about that with Danny Shaw up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about all news we got just before the budget yesterday. Obviously, didn't spend much time on it because, of course, we had that shock revelation of the budget in advance and then the actual terms of it. But when the former Marine Paul Doyle, who had been headed to trial, it was the second day of his trial in Liverpool over the mowing down of dozens and dozens of pedestrians at the Liverpool Victory Parade, injuring 130 people, including a 6-month-old baby. He suddenly changed his plea from not guilty at the start of the trial, with a jury already sworn in, to guilty. Well, let's talk about this with Home Affairs commentator Danny Shaw. Good afternoon to you, Danny.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much, Danny. Could you just take us back to what happened on that day and the charges that were brought against Paul Doyle?
Well, fans of Liverpool celebrating their Premier League victory on the 26th of May earlier this year. Huge parade through the centre of Liverpool. A number of streets were cordoned off, obviously, as you'd expect. Thousands of fans. Brilliant day's celebration, obviously. And then there was just carnage. A car driven by Paul Doyle sort of ploughed into the crowds and trapping people beneath the car, causing numerous injuries. And people were desperately trying to stop the car. Eventually, the car stopped and police managed to get the driver out. And it emerged that this was Paul Doyle, former Royal Marine, a cybersecurity specialist, family man who lived in Croxteth, married to a teacher, has got 3 sons, and it would appear to be completely out of character from everything that's been described by friends and neighbours in the area.
Yeah.
He was someone who was likeable, who was friendly. There were no signs apparently earlier that day. He was talking to a neighbour as he was doing his garden and his front garden. There were no signs that he was annoyed or upset about anything.
And then out of the blue this happened. But what was interesting, of course, is that on the day, we were covering it, that everyone assumed it was a terror attack. And given the modus operandi we've seen with various terror attacks from Islamist extremists, and this was a whole big debate about, after Axel Rudakabana, were we going to be told, or post Axel Rudakabana, were we going to be told, whether this was a British man or, and his immigration status and everything. And it emerged very quickly. This was, a white British man from the local area. I think everyone was really quite surprised. And there was quite a lot of sympathy almost for, had this man been scared? Had he been, had he lost control of his car? That this couldn't possibly be deliberate. And I know a lot of people who would otherwise have been very this guy's a lunatic, he needs to go away for life. A lot of people being very sympathetic to him.
Well, I think there was an initial sort of bewilderment, as you said, was it had the hallmarks of a terror attack, and then it emerges it clearly isn't a terror attack. And, bewilderment. Did he have some kind of seizure in the car? Did he panic? Was he overwhelmed by the crowds? Was he trying to get out? All of those things. But when you listen very carefully to the statements that were made after yesterday's hearing, which he suddenly changed his plea to guilty on all 31 charges in front of him, and you listen to what the police and prosecutors said, and you look at the evidence, it's quite clear that this was a deliberate act. It was calculated, in the words of the prosecutor, Sarah Hammond. He intentionally drove into crowds of innocent people. He had become increasingly agitated by the crowds. She said it was calculated violence, not a momentary lapse. And I think when you look at that, and you also, the police were saying that his driving before he ploughed into the crowds was aggressive and dangerous. He was undertaking vehicles, jumping lanes. He ran through a red light, circumvented the traffic system that had been put in place for the football parade.
Followed an ambulance
I think you
or
can
something.
See it was very deliberate, Julia.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, you say
will ebb away.
31 counts. He pleaded guilty to 17 counts of attempting to cause grievous bodily harm with intent in relation to 12 adults and 5 children, included 6-month-old little lad Teddy Everson, who's thrown apparently 15 feet down the road in his pram. 4 other children as well, but also admitted causing grievous bodily harm with intent to 9 adults, wounding with intent against a child, and admitted dangerous driving and affray. I mean, these extraordinary range, of offences. 130 people injured that day. Some, I say, life-changing injuries. It is a matter of complete luck that no one died, given that people were pinned actually underneath the car and the mayhem. Again, I think everyone will have seen those videos that were around social media. So do we have an idea of motive, other than the reasoning behind his dangerous driving? There was some reports that he'd been in the pub earlier.
Well, apparently, according to friends, he didn't drink and he didn't take drugs, and there's no charge of drunk driving.
And they would have
I'm sure he was alcohol tested for alcohol. So I don't think that's the reason.
Just a man having an angry road rage moment and just taking it out on
a terrible, terrible road rage moment. Yeah. That was prolonged, that went on for 7 minutes and resulted in 134 people being injured, and some very seriously. He will be sentenced on the 14th and 15th and 16th of December. He's been told by the judge to expect a custodial sentence. I think it's going to be lengthy. The maximum sentence for some of these offences is life imprisonment. I don't think he'll get that. But he is looking at a number of years in prison. And we may get then, Julia, we may at the hearing, the sentencing hearing, we may from his barrister hear some mitigation or some explanation as to what happened. Was he under stress? Were there other things going on in his life that was causing him to sort of simmer with this anger, and then it just boiled over? We'll have to wait and see.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? We were expecting a fairly lengthy trial, weren't we? And then he changed his plea. I mean, he certainly, when he's appeared in court before, because obviously there are a number of different court appearances before an actual trial takes place with a jury, where he has he's been very tearful, head in his hands, looking absolutely kind of broken man, held on remand, of course, right now. Is there any reason being given for why he's suddenly on day 2 of his trial? We know a lot of people who've accused of crimes, when the trial day actually comes, they actually plead guilty because there's the last chance to get a lower tariff for any crime that if you believe you are going to be found guilty for it. But do we know why at this point in the trial he decided to change his plea?
No, it's a mystery. He pleaded not guilty all the way through. The jury had been sworn in the day before. Yeah. And then this was going to be the prosecution opening the case. I can't believe it's because, like some defendants, they wait to see whether the witnesses turn up. Yeah. And then when they do, then they realise, OK, the game's up, and they switch their plea to guilty. Some other people are hoping that they might get a discount in their sentence. He's not. He will get very little credit because he pleaded guilty so late. So I can't see that's the reason. I think perhaps it just took him until that moment to realise, to acknowledge what he'd done and the fact that this 3 or 4 week trial was about to start. I mean, so what has gone on in his head, we can only speculate.
And you're going to hear the testimony from those who've been injured as well. Danny Shaw, really appreciate you joining us, explaining all that to us. Home Affairs commentator Danny Shaw. Henry Hill listening to all of that from Conservative Home. Obviously not a political story, but I remember at the time, it was a very big deal. It was a big deal about whether or not he'd be identified quickly by the police, that the whole, 2-tier policing and the like, but also just the utter sort of bewilderment at what could possibly have driven this sort of completely average, normal family man to have done something so heinous.
And I think the thing is, my assumption when I heard that it was an ex-serviceman was that it was potentially some sort of PTSD, right? Because, if you think if you're deployed in Afghanistan or Iraq, you're in a vehicle that's surrounded by crowds, there could be a bomber in it, there could be an IED, but apparently not, right? And I think that that must be in one ways one of the strangest things about this, especially for those poor people who were hurt or who had loved ones hurt, because at least even if it's a terror attack or it's a machine malfunction or whatever else, having an explanation. But this seems to be somebody who has no underlying mental health condition that we can, with no reason to be angry, who then did a deliberate 7-minute attack. It's just
it's utterly bewildering. It really is. I mean, that ties in also. We're waiting for the jury to arrive. Of course, we've got a jury being sworn in the day before. We've got this attack on jury trials from the Justice Secretary David Lammy. Of course, when he was Shadow Justice Secretary back in 2020, famously said that the jury trials were, absolutely fundamental to our democratic system, and apparently now they're not, and he wants to go further and faster than what was even recommended by Lord Leveson in his report, suggesting, how we could actually speed up and make more efficient the justice system. Getting rid of jury trials for all but men. I mean, I'm wondering. Actually, I don't think he wouldn't face a jury for these. If David Lammy had his way, there would be no jury there to deliver that verdict, because this isn't rape or manslaughter or murder. This would be GBH and other charges. So there wouldn't be a jury. How worried are you about the idea that you wouldn't, if for such serious charges, that you could actually not have a jury?
I mean, so I think there are definitely cases where there is a case for restricting jury trial, but it's really complex white-collar fraud, right?
Those fraud cases that take 2 years.
They take 2 or 3 years. People have to give up their entire lives. They're not trained accountants or financiers. There's no real prospect of them actually following it. And so in those cases, I think there is some case for reform. But ultimately, juries are not the reason that we have a court backlog, right?
Exactly.
The court backlog is because we don't have enough, magistrates and judges, and we don't have enough prison places, so we can,
or enough money to have enough courts open.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not they say it's going to clear the backlog, but it's not going to clear the backlog.
No.
That's, I think.
So it's not going to solve the problem.
It's not even going to solve the problem.
And it's going to create other problems.
Right,
and again,
exactly.
as we've seen with the two-tier justice and two-tier policing over the last few years, that actually the juries are the ones that have been the voices of sanity and common sense. Just like voters. It's 12 people. Of your peers making a judgment on whether or not they think that you have or have not done something. This is the ultimate justice system.
Well, I think the ironic thing is, if there was one thing that I would have, if you asked me to make the case against juries, the one thing that I would cite is this evidence from research from the Home Office in 2007 that found enormous evidence of racial bias in how juries treated
thought they found the opposite.
Defendant. No, 2007, enormous bias, right? But you know what the thing is? If you showed that research to David Lammy, it'd probably bring him back out in favour of him.
Ouch. 12:48 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk about, very rarely, a bit of good news on the migrant front. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has won a court case, basically to prevent pretty much anyone who wants to arrive from Gaza to join a member of their family from being able to come here. I personally think this is a jolly good thing. We'll talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza about that up next. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean. The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. We talked a lot about the budget today, also about migration. But there's one bit of good news on that front. Delighted to having joined me now is Dr. Alan Mendoza. He's Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society and actually also just taken on a role advising the Reform Party, very interestingly. Good afternoon to you, Alan.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, this is a rare bit of good news from the courts on a migration front. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has managed to overturn a human rights ruling that granted Palestinians fleeing Gaza refuge in Britain. She's been backed by the Court of Appeal in restricting the ability of migrants to use the European Convention on Human Rights, our old friend, to come and live in the UK. This is particularly involving one Palestinian family who basically won an immigration tribunal ruling to come here under a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees on the basis that they did have a relative here. So how significant is this?
Well, it is significant. Firstly, the original ruling was an absolute travesty. The idea that you could apply under a Ukrainian scheme when you weren't a Ukrainian, didn't matter who you were, and could then be given permission to come to the UK was, I think, demonstrated to most people how out of control the system was. So, outrageous initial decision. Government appealed it, and I think rather perhaps even to her surprise, the appeal court has decided that she's right. And there are limits, apparently, after all, to Article 8 of the ECHR.
Who knew?
I mean, who knew?
But again, there's also what's fascinating. It was right to a family life. This isn't about a mum being able to bring her children in. This is about two brothers. So I'm a Palestinian family in Gaza.
Kids, two grown-up brothers.
Two grown-up brothers. But my brother lives in England, in the UK, and I want to come and join you. My stepsister lives in New York. I've not got a right to go and live in New York.
Well, had you applied under British immigration law, you might have done. Who knew? But the reality is that ruling was very dangerous because it literally meant that you could have had any kind of relatives anywhere in the world and they could come to the UK and claim the right to family life. So it is pleasing that this judgment has been secured. It's also, of course, now case law, which is helpful going forwards. This case will be used by other judges to determine other similar cases. Now, it doesn't solve the problem, of course, because there are still family, law rights in terms of that ECHR that will need to be tackled. But look, it's good news, as you said, and how often do we get good news from these judgments?
Well, indeed. And this is in particular in relation to Gaza, because we know this isn't, again, no, it's not, it's not Islamophobic. This is a particularly radicalised, militarised society, I mean, across the scale, who have happily voted for Hamas and would vote for Hamas again, probably, to be their government. And I'm not entirely sure the British people are thinking, we should have in a load of people from Gaza, because their argument was basically their quality of life was so terrible, and living in Gaza and during the war, post-war, whatever happened, it's too awful. Well, that's an argument that all 2 million people in Gaza could make, surely.
Well, I mean, that is, the problem. I mean, things are bad there, no doubt about it. Although now, since the conflict has stopped, things getting better, which is also something to take into account. But you're right, that could have literally been used by anyone, and not simply in Gaza once again. It could have been anyone in any war zone or any kind of crisis zone anywhere in the world saying, I've done here, I've got a random relative in Britain, I'm going to come to Britain because... my life here is in crisis and you should take me in. So that's a problem.
And the absurd thing, of course, is that as each person is taken in, you then extend it. We're told it's not that very many people.
Or chain migration.
And then another person around them. And of course, we've had the students, these young Gazan students who've been brought over here to London universities where they're studying, some postgraduate degrees. And it's absolutely fascinating. Then they said, well, we were told we couldn't bring our kids, but now we want to bring our kids. And there was one woman on the radio the other day, and she was saying about, she hadn't seen her child for a couple of years. And you think, sorry, what sort of mother leaves their young child in a war zone so they can go and do a postgraduate degree? I've never heard anything more obscene.
it's a bizarre personal choice. I would agree, and not one that you or I or many right-thinking people would follow. But look, again, that's an interesting point. They were given visas on the understanding they would not be able to bring family members, and then suddenly they were allowed or encouraged to bring family members. It really is, again, encouraging people to come into this country through the back door. And the other issue specific to Gaza is, of course, that, as you said earlier, this is a militarized society, and it was a society full of hate. And we have no clue who the people coming into this country from Gaza really are, what they believe in, whether they participated in things around October the 7th. I mean, you will know the stories. You've heard the stories of the hostages who were held by civilians in their homes, by doctors, lawyers, accountants, other people. Ordinary people were
UN staff, UNRWA staff.
Who on earth, are the people coming in here? We don't know the answer to those questions, and one has to be very sceptical as a result, because you just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Just must finally ask you, we had a load of figures from the ONS and the OBR, or every other organisation with an O in the name, about where we are with migrants and net migration. But the fascinating figures that we got last night, that some 50-odd thousand illegal migrants not supposed to be in this country, definitely not supposed to be, are supposed to be leaving, including some foreign criminals. Home Office doesn't know where they are. They've just disappeared into the ether. Bit worrying.
Very worrying, because, of course, we've seen some illegal migrants who have committed crimes. So, obviously, again, who are these people? We don't know. We don't know who they are, their backgrounds, whether they have criminal records or not. Yep. And it's just a basic problem, isn't it? If you lose control of people who are supposed to be monitoring and they then are allowed to melt away, you don't know what the next step is. Absolutely. So it's basic, it's really bread and butter stuff. We need to be much better at this. And ideally, of course, they need to be, if they've arrived illegally and aren't allowed to stay, they need to be got out straight away.
Absolutely. Dr. Alan Mendoza from the Henry Jackson Society, thank you very much indeed. Henry Hill's still with me. This is fascinating. If you look at Donald Trump, Washington, D.C., we had 2 members of the National Guard shot, critically injured last night. His immediate response, suspending all visa applications from Afghanistan, because there's an Afghan man who's suspected of the shooting. I mean, I quite like that response. I think we should do more of that.
I mean, one of the big problems that we have is that we have historically just refused to make that kind of sensible intervention. Why did we end up having to jack up the amount of money that your spouse had to come to bring into the country? Yeah. Because there was a problem with 7 countries of using the spousal visa system, and the Home Office was a bit squeamish about targeting those countries, so they applied the rules to everyone. Yeah.
It's just mind-blowing. You never know, they might get to grips with it, but given that the budget went so well, I've not got much hope. Joining us right now, I'd like to say, is Ian Collins. He's here for the next year.
What are moaning about? They've solved the problem. Numbers have gone down, everything's good. They've lost 53,000 people, but that can happen to anybody.
No, we can. Who hasn't? Who hasn't lost 53,000 illegal migrants? Come on.
It's very easy done.
Sunshine hour.
Absolutely, yeah. We're going to put a positive spin on this. Labour have solved the immigration, or have they?
If you just lose them all, then there isn't an immigration crisis.
And of course, the legal immigration, all that is down to Tory policies that happened previously, as you've been discussing.
Exactly. And you had some fun with the budget yesterday. You had Kenny Badenoch's response.
It's funny. I was just talking to Andrew Neil outside after he'd been with you, and Andrew's been through, as you know, about 1,000